Chapter 304. The most dangerous place on Demonic Mountain was Immortal's Ruins, and the most mysterious place in Immortal's Ruins was Jade Palace. The two of them talked about their feelings after they parted. When Mo Tinga heard Lord Taoist Jinghe went to Jade Palace, she asked about it. Qinshi said, Jade Palace is said to be the immortal residence where immortals rested during the Great War between immortals and demons, so the fallen immortals were buried nearby, forming Immortal's Ruins. There are many relics left by immortals in Jade Palace, although most of them are damaged, and some of them are too dense for cultivators like us to use. There are also some strange things. If you get them, it'll be a great fated chance. Mo Tinga knew a little about this, but it seemed a bit unusual this time. Aside from Jade Palace, there are also many treasures in other places on Demonic Mountain, right? Why did all the nascent soul cultivators go to Jade Palace this time? She said with a smile. Naturally, they got some news that there are rare treasures in Chapter Jade Palace.
305.
At this point,
After a simple
trace of
ceremony
doubt appeared in his eyes, and he said with uncertainty,
apologized to the skeleton
Master told
and
me
put it
that
into
a
the
treasure
jar she
appeared
prepared
one by
Jade
one,
Palace last
preparing
time.
to take it back
Four
to the
nascent
secular
soul
world
cultivators
and
like
bury
them.
it with her mother.
They might be able to
When
break
she was traveling
through
the
in one
foundation
go.
building
So this
realm,
time, she
many
wanted to go
nascent
back
soul
to the
cultivators
Mo
want to go to the
family's
Jade
village.
Palace to try their
At
luck.
that time,
It's
she had
actually such a
already
treasure.
entered the territory
Mo
of
Tinga
Jin,
was very
but she was
surprised.
attracted by the
The
spiritual
higher one's
aura
cultivation
fluctuation
level
of
was,
Z-Ways
the fewer
in
treasures
Mortal's
that
Cave.
could advance
It had been
one's
76
cultivation level.
years since
So
she
most
went back.
nascent soul cultivators were
76
stuck
years.
in the early stage.
Her
of
grandparents
nascent soul.
and
A few
uncles
entered the
must
middle
have turned into
stage of
skeleton
nascent soul,
and
very
Jun
few
and the others
entered the
must have
late
died,
stage of
right?
nascent soul.
She didn't know
There
if
were
her
only
mother's
4 or
grave was
5
taken
in the
care of
entire
in a few
celestial
days
pole in the
She planned to
past
go back
thousands
to
of
the
years.
Mo family's
Many
village
nascent
in Jin
soul
to move her
cultivators
mother's
reached
remains
the
and
peak of
second
their
uncle's
realm
ashes
after
back
hundreds
to
of
the
years of
family's
cultivation,
ancestral
but
grave.
lacked fated chances
After putting away her
advance.
father's remains,
Their master,
Mo
Lord
Tinga
Taoist
looked
Jinghe,
up
was
and
the
carefully
same.
looked at the
If it was
cave
really
they
such a
hid in.
treasure,
The rock
it was
walls
no
were
wonder
illuminated by
so
the
many
immortal
nascent
fire,
soul
which was very
cultivators wanted
hot.
Jade Palace.
Did you hide here?
Yes.
She crouched down
she spoke,
and poked the corner.
he then shook
with
his
the
head.
3 young
But it's
real
hard to
fire
say.
sword.
Such a
As if he was
treasure
looking for
already
something.
appeared last
When
time.
he heard her voice,
How could it
he
be so
answered,
coincidental
when
that it
restrictions
appeared
on
again
Demonic
this time?
Mountain collapsed.
I'm a bit worried
Your father
about
and I
Master's
hid in
trip.
tens of
Mo
thousands of
Tinga
feet
nodded,
peak.
feeling a
After
bit
things
heavy.
stabilized
With
a bit,
so many
we
nascent
found we
soul
couldn't get out,
cultivators,
so we
if there
went
was
to
a
Immortal's
conflict.
Ruins.
But with
The
Master's
reason I came
strength,
here is
it
because I
shouldn't
want
be
to
difficult for
cultivate
him
a
to
secret
stay
technique.
alive.
The two
At
of
that
them
time,
pondered each other for
your
a
father
while.
was
Then
seriously injured.
She said, if we left him alone,
Master knows what
he
he's
wouldn't have
doing,
lived for more
so we
than a
don't need
few
to worry
days.
about him.
He saved
It's
me on the
getting
way.
late.
Let's
So I
retrieve
brought
your
him
father's
here.
remains.
I see.
And get out of
This
here.
was indeed
as
the
soon
best
as
place
possible.
to practice yang spells.
Yes.
Fire was the
Tinga
most
stood up
important element
and
of
pondered
yang,
for a moment.
especially
She then lowered her
since
head
this
to
place
look
was
at the
full of
heavenly
immortal
aromatic
fire.
herbs.
After
that
a while,
covered the entire
she
mountain.
breathed a sigh of relief.
Since we've encountered them,
and stood up.
why don't we take
I
some of
finally
these heavenly
found
aromatic
Mo
beans back?
Tinga asked
It'll be
curiously,
easier to exchange
"What are you looking
for the
for?"
chalcedony. She walked back
Qinshi
and
stared
stared
at
at
these
these
heavenly
heavenly
aromatic
aromatic
beans
beans and
several
recalled
pitch
what she
black
almost
stones
experienced.
lay in his palm.
He felt
Mo
displeased
Tinga
and
picked
said,
one up and
"What do you
felt
want
the
them
heat
for?"
was pressing
I
down
found the
on her.
chalcedony. She thought about it and was
The
surprised.
two of them had only been
Are these
apart
fire
for such a
essence
short
stones?
period of time.
Qinshi
And
nodded.
he
with
already had a
smile.
chalcedony.
Yes, they are.
From inside
the
his
so-called
robe,
fire essence
Qinshi took out the
stone was a
Xian
kind
fire
of
jade
or
essence.
produced in
It was
places
sparkling,
with abundant real
translucent,
fire, and was
about the
commonly
size of
known
2
as the
palms.
essence of fire.
Where did you get such a
in the
good
beginning?
chalcedony?
The fire essence stone was red.
Tinga,
As the
was
real fire
pleasantly
essence
surprised
stone burned
as she
for
took
a
the
long
chalcedony.
time. The
This
red
kind of
became
chalcedony
darker and
was at
darker
least several
until it
thousand
finally
years
turned
old.
black.
Furthermore,
These fire essence
it didn't have
stones
the
were
slightest
pitch black in
trace of
color.
impurities.
Clearly,
they were
the
definitely
highest
a
grade,
high quality.
This is what you want to get.
chalcedony.
Yes.
More importantly,
She said,
there was enough
back then,
chalcedony.
I found fire
Even
pit
if he
stones in
failed,
this fire
he
pit.
could refine it
I
again.
tried my best to
Qinshi
take them
smiled.
out of the immortal fire.
The Luan
but the
and
fire
Feng
was
duo
still
from
too
Biyun
strong.
sect gave it to me.
I couldn't take them away.
In the end,
so I
it was
hid
for
them
Master's
here.
sake.
So,
Mo,
you want to come back
raised her head.
There's
and
nothing we can
smiled.
do about it.
Master's reputation
Back then,
is really
you
valuable.
left in such a
Such
hurry
a big
that you didn't even
chalcedony
take your father's
can't be bought
corpse with you.
outside.
Naturally,
she
you
also
have to come
smiled.
back. When
This
he
is
mentioned
great.
this matter,
Your heaven
Mo
and earth
Tinga
fan
once
can
again
finally be
recalled what he
refined.
said.
And
right, the other
what did my
materials
father
had
promise you
long
back
been
then?
prepared.
Why did you
They
say
also found
that the
Qiyun
matter
stone,
of dual
and
cultivation
now they
is up
also
to
had
you?
the 1,000-year-old
Upon hearing
chalcedony.
this, Qinshi
They could
coughed
refine
and
magic
looked away.
weapons
after
This,
returning,
upon
from
noticing
demonic
that his
mountain.
face was
Mo
a bit
Tinga
red.
put the chalcedony
Tinga
into her
became
chinquin bag.
even more curious.
The two of them rested for a
What?
while.
Is there
then
something you
summoned
can't
their
say?
flying magic
There's no
weapons,
harm in telling
planning
you.
to leave
She
Lonely
smiled
Peak. And
the
said
two of them
slowly,
flew into the air.
no matter which cultivator
she
you tell
stood on
about
a flying
pure
cloud
constitution,
and looked down at
they
the
might be
heavenly
tempted.
aromatic
Your
beams
father
that
thought of
covered
this,
the entire
so he
mountain.
said this.
He frowned.
This means
and
that I
raised
can
his hand.
choose a dual
Fire
cultivation
spiritual
partner
aura
for you,
gathered
no
in his
matter who
palm.
it is, forming
You can also
fireball.
choose yourself.
With a wave of his
This,
hand,
your
the
father
fireball
indeed
fell on the mountain
had this
peak
intention,
and burst.
but I didn't
into
have this
flames.
idea at that time.
Upon seeing
Believe
this,
me,
upon
Tinga
seeing him
shouted,
hurriedly
"You're
denying
burning
it,
all of them?"
these
Tinga
heavenly
smiled.
aromatic herbs
It's not
have
like
been
I don't
rooted here
believe
for a
you.
longer time
What's the rush?
than the spiritual
She
plants
sighed and
in
said,
her virtual sky
I understand what my father
Wouldn't it be a
meant.
pity to burn
In that
them?
case,
Although I
she
don't
snorted.
have the freedom
Keeping
to
them
perform
is
dual
also a
cultivation,
scourge. I can
these
still
things might be
cultivate
useful to
diligently.
others.
I
but
also
for
have a
him,
backer.
They were
Relatively
really
speaking,
unpleasant
I
memories.
still have a future.
Mo Tinga thought
If the
about
person
it
her
and
father
felt he was
entrusted
right.
to wasn't
Without these
this would
heavenly
probably
aromatic
be her
herbs,
future.
she wouldn't have
Correct.
almost experienced
She said,
such a terrible
I won't
thing.
deny that back
So she
then.
didn't say anything.
If you really had
The
a
fire
pure
grew
green
bigger
constitution
and bigger,
spiritual
engulfing
roots,
the
it would be
entire
good for
peak.
Xianxing
Soon,
to accept
all
you
the heavenly
as a
aromatic
disciple
herbs
and
would
have
burn,
dual cultivation
and the
of
heavenly
other
aromatic
disciples.
beans in the
But you
fire
ran away
made
by
crackling
yourself.
sounds.
So I didn't think about
Seeing
this
that
matter
all the
anymore.
heavenly aromatic
The two of
herbs
them were
burned.
silent for a while.
Sheen,
She held her in
Tinga
his
smiled
arms.
and said, "Forget
Let's
it.
go.
Let's not
Tinga
talk about this
nodded.
anymore. It was
We've
good to
already
burn them
achieved
all.
our goal.
Burning them
Are we gonna
made her
leave
feel
now?
better. She didn't want to recall that
She
memory.
nodded. By the
Master
way,
specifically
where's
reminded me to
ginseng?
leave
She suddenly
as
thought
soon
of
as
this
we finished
question.
our business.
She
She
said
said
there might be a
faintly,
collapse.
I
of
told
a
him to
big
go
restriction
first.
this time.
He looked
And it
down
might
and
be even
glanced
bigger
at
than
Mo
last
Tinga.
time.
I think you'll be
good if we got
unhappy
implicated.
to see him.
Mo
Tinga
Tinga
didn't
didn't
object.
object. She
Aside
really didn't
from
want
being
to see
fed
ginseng
heavenly
again.
aromatic beans.
It was hard for him
She didn't
to
suffer
even think of
any
this.
injuries.
The two of them
The
followed
effects
the
of the
feng
heavenly
shui
aromatic
compass left
beans
by
had
Lord
long
Daoist
worn off.
Jinghe, so she
and
had
smoothly
abundant
went out of
spiritual
fog.
power now.
Lord Daoist
Then let's go.
Jinghe
It'll be half a
once
month
said they were in
3
the
to
depths
5
of a
days.
mortal's ruins.
It's hard to say.
There were
when
too
the
many
restriction
dangers,
at the entrance
and it wasn't a
of
place
demonic
core
mountain will
formation
appear.
cultivators like
The
them
two
should
of them
come
rested
to.
for a while.
She also
prepared
knew this,
everything
so
and went out the way
he
they
took
came.
Mo Tinga back
Mo
to
Tinga
tens of thousands
looked
of
at the
feet
countless
deep.
holes on the
A day
ground,
later,
burning
after several
with a
close
mortal
calls,
fire.
the two
She
of them
suddenly
finally
thought of
returned to
something
their
and
original
asked
route.
She
Even
breathed
ordinary
a sigh
stones
of
here
relief.
probably have the
There aren't
power
any demonic
of a
beasts
mortal
here.
fire
If we're
sealed
careful, right?
we should be able to
She
reach our
nodded.
destination in
Yes.
half a day.
Why do you ask?
Mo Tinga was a
said
little
then,
excited when
"Do you
she
have a way to
thought
get
of
some
their
up here?"
destination.
She
nodded.
glanced at her,
In,
but didn't say
The two of them
anything.
walked along
He
the
took out the
rocks
3 young
and
real
entered a
fire
dense
sword,
forest, which
Be
emitted
careful.
a dazzling light.
She said.
The
This
sword
is
light
bone
shot
eroding
straight
wood.
down.
Just
and
a little bit will
instantly
make you
shot
rot
back.
into a pile
He
of
stretched out his
bones in an
hand
instant.
and used his
Mo
fire
Tinga
spiritual
was
aura
shocked.
to catch
Its
several
toxicity
stones.
is so
He
strong.
handed them to her.
If we
and
take it
said,
out,
put them in a
won't it be
jade box
terrible when we
They were
fight
just
against
ordinary
enemies?
stones.
Sheen,
Even if they were
she shook his
calcined
head.
by a mortal
We
fire,
can't take it out.
they should still
Although
be
the
preserved in
toxicity
a
of
jade
his
box.
bone eroding
Mo
wood is
Tinga
strong.
obediently
It
put them in the
disappears
jade
very
box
quickly.
and asked
After
him
it's
to use the
unearthed,
3 young
its
real fire
toxicity will
sword to get some
completely
more stones
disappear
back.
in about a day.
Only when a jade
Putting in a
box
jade
was full
box
did
won't
she
work.
put it into her
I
chinkling
see.
bag.
The two
After
of them
watching her
propped up
put their
the stones away.
protective spiritual
Sheen, she
aura,
asked,
released
"You don't
their
practice fire
defensive magic
spells.
weapons.
What do you need
and
these stones
cautiously
for?"
entered the forest.
Mo Tinga smiled.
This way, and patted
Sheen,
her
she led the
spiritual
way,
beast pouch,
flying close.
You forgot
to the
that I
ground.
have Xiaowa.
The area of this bone eroding
Sheen,
wood was
she
quite
suddenly
large.
understood.
The
That
two of them
little
were
spiritual
afraid of
beast
touching the
was
leaves,
born with
so it took them a
sun-real
long
fire.
time to get out
If
of
it
the
practiced
forest.
well,
After
it would
passing
definitely
through
be
the
a good
forest
helper
of
in the
bone,
future.
eroding wood.
After thinking
the
for a
scenery
while,
in front of them
Sheen,
changed.
she said,
The
"You
sky
have
was
Xiaowa
dark,
for
and the
spiritual
ground was
beasts,
full of holes,
and you have
of
the
various
soul refining
sizes.
art for unique
Some of the
skills.
holes were still
If you
burning,
refine the
making
heaven
the
and
surroundings
earth fan,
look dark red.
you won't lose
Mo
to
Tinga
ordinary
looked
middle
around and
stage
asked,
core formation
"Why does this place look like
cultivators
this?"
in fights
These holes were
of
too
magical
small.
powers.
So
if the
they
power of the
obviously
heaven
weren't
and earth fan
volcanoes,
is
but
amazing,
there were so many of
you
them,
can also
which was
fight
really
against
strange.
late-stage core
Sheen,
formation
she said,
cultivators.
"These are traces
traces left by
you'd better
ancient
practice
immortals
several
who used
secret
fire
techniques.
magics.
There
Fire
are
spell.
always variables
Mo
in fights
Tinga
and
stared at
magical
the
powers.
endless ruins,
So save some unique
yearning
skills
in
to
her
save
heart.
your life.
What kind of powerful spell would be
Mo
able to leave
Tinga
behind
also
such a
thought about
huge
this.
trace?
Her best
Maybe
unique
these things
skill
were only
to save
done
her life
casually
was the
by
virtual
an
sky
ancient
world.
Of course, after
this
the
way.
incident with Ren
She
Yufeng,
once again
she realized
summoned
that
his
no
flying
unique
cloud.
skill was
He pulled
completely reliable.
Tinga,
So she better
floated
prepare
in the air
several backup
and slowly
plans.
flew
to the right.
Unfortunately,
In the bone
we didn't
eroding
get
wood
any
forest,
useful
they
treasures
could
on
only
this
fly
trip.
close to the
Otherwise,
ground,
but above
your
these
cultivation
holes,
level
they
could
could
only
only
fly
improve.
high.
These were
Tinga
fire
thought
elemental
about it
spells
and held
left
back her
behind
words.
by the Immortals.
She wasn't in a hurry to
They were not
improve
something
her
that the
cultivation
three
level.
great
She
true
had an
fires of
unlimited
today
supply of
could
clear
compare
sky
to,
pills,
although the
and her
three
qualifications
great true
weren't
fires
bad.
were powerful.
Reaching the peak
They were
stage
mortal
of the core
fires.
formation realm
These were immortal
was only a
fires.
matter of time.
If the immortal
This time,
cultivators were to
she
face
found
them,
1,000-year-old
they would
Chalcedony
definitely
and
not
the
be
Cheen
able to
stone.
withstand it. So,
After flying
she was
for a
already
while,
very happy.
they still hadn't
Senior
flown
Marshal
out of the
Brothers.
ruins. Now that
So
you found the
Cheen,
fire
she
essence
suddenly
stone,
descended.
are you going to
Senior
enter
Marshal
closed door
Brother
meditation when we go back?
Tinga called out.
And where are we
Cheen,
going?
she nodded. Cheen, she
keenly
said
noticed
firmly,
that she was a
"It's
bit
down
depressed.
So he asked,
Tinga looked down.
"What's wrong?
But there were
Are
only
you unhappy?"
several dazzling
Mo
holes
Tinga
below,
was stunned for a
and
while.
there was no
then
other
sighed.
place to go.
I think
While she
this
was
time,
feeling
you must be
bewildered,
very confident
Cheen, she's
in
flying
advancing
cloud was
to the
still
nascent soul
descending,
realm,
flying into one
At
of the
that
holes.
time,
Our
Senior
cultivation
Marshal
levels
Brother,
will be one
this
big
was an immortal
realm apart.
fire. What's
If
the
it
matter?
burned them,
They
Cheen,
wouldn't be
she
able to
said
bear
with a smile.
Cheen, she held
Which
her
pair
hand
of dual
and
cultivation
comforted her.
partners
It's
doesn't have a
okay.
cultivation
Don't
level
worry.
gap? Even
Just
among
as
the
the flying
Wan
cloud
and
was about to
Feng
touch
couple,
the immortal
Ding Wan's
fire in the
cultivation
hole,
level is
it suddenly
slightly
flew
higher than
over the
Feng
immortal
Zhao's,
fire,
but don't they
and
still
crashed
cultivate
into the
and
wall
live
of the hole.
together?
The flying cloud was
That's
extremely
true.
fast,
But
just as it was about to
always
crash into
felt
the
that the
wall,
cultivation level gap between
Tinga
them was
saw
a bit
a
too
cave
big.
on the wall.
It wasn't that there
And the
weren't
flying
nascent
cloud
soul
flew into the
cultivators
cave in
and
an
core
instant.
formation
We're
cultivators
here.
who became
Cheen, she
partners.
withdrew the
But
flying
relatively
cloud,
speaking,
looked at
the
the cave,
proportion of female
and sighed.
cultivators among
It's been more
nascent
than
soul
80
cultivators
years.
was very small.
I didn't expect to come
Many
back
male
here again.
cultivators
Mo
married
Tinga glanced
core
around.
formation
Although
female
the entrance of the
cultivators.
cave was
but their
very
dual
small,
cultivation
the inside of the
relationships were
cave
mostly
was very
spacious.
spacious. Of
She was
course,
surrounded by
she wasn't
dark
worried
red
about
rock
Cheen
walls,
Shi, which
how could
looked
she not trust him
terrifying.
now? Is
However,
this the place
this
where
couldn't
my
go
father
on.
died?
Cultivators
Mo
in the
Tinga
same
couldn't
realm
help but
should
walk
communicate
inside
more
and
after
help
walking
each
for a
other.
while,
So their
she
relationship
stopped.
would be more
At the
stable.
bottom of the cave,
Cheen, she
there was
thought
a
for a
stone
while
platform.
then said,
On
"What
the
I said
stone
last time,
platform, we'll practice
lay
the same
a withered
cultivation
skeleton.
technique.
Scattered
Have you thought about
clothes
it?
hung on the body.
About that.
And it was
It's a
clean
good
without
method.
any flesh,
You were very confident
leaving only
last time.
white bones.
So did you prepare for
Mo
it?
Tinga
Cheen, she
couldn't
smiled.
move her
Of
eyes
course.
away from the skeleton.
Mo Tinga was
She slowly
curious.
moved
You
until
know, our
she reached the
physiques
stone
are special,
platform, and the
gently
cultivation
knelt down.
technique we practice
Father
is
I
also
finally
special.
get to see
Does the
you.
dual cultivation
Although it was just a
technique
skeleton,
you mentioned,
and she
also
couldn't see
have this
any
miraculous
traces of her
effect?
father. Cheen,
And
she
Mo
smiled
Tinga
but didn't
still
answer.
couldn't help
He
but
was
cry.
anxious because of
She
her urging.
remembered
So
many,
he just said,
many
"You'll know
things.
later."
Her
The two of
lonely
them
childhood,
talked all the way
her sick
back
mother,
along the path.
the
they came
days when
from.
she,
after
and
half
her
a
mother
day,
depended on each
they
other
finally
for
returned
survival.
to tens
At that
of
time,
thousands of feet.
she longed for her father
They
to
spent
come
another
back
day going
and live
down
happily
from tens
with her
of
family.
thousands of feet.
But he didn't come back.
Once they were
even
out of
when
the
her mother
range
passed
of
away.
tens of
At that
thousands of
time,
feet peak.
it wasn't that
Both
she
of
didn't
them
hate her
heaved
father,
sighs of
but she
relief.
always thought
There
that
were
maybe
many
her
dangers
father
and
also had
Immortals
his own
ruins.
difficulties.
So it was much
It wasn't
safer
that he
down
didn't come to
there.
pick her up,
But after a
he
while,
definitely
Mo
had
Tinga
other
was
things to do.
surprised. She
What are
guessed
they
the
doing?
result correctly.
This was the
but
third
she
time
didn't
she saw
guess
a
the
group
reason
of people
correctly.
fighting each other.
It wasn't that
They
her father
fought
didn't come to pick her up because
and
he had
flesh
other things to
and
do.
blood flew
but
everywhere.
He died.
The scene
here.
was so tragic
Before he
that
died,
she couldn't bear to
he
see.
entrusted her to the
Cheen, she
only
frowned
person
and
he could
said,
trust. The restrictions on Demonic
Unfortunately,
Mountain,
due to
only
a strange
disappear
combination
for
of
about a month,
factors,
and it's already
she
been
wandered
more
from
than
place
half
to
a month.
place for 10 years.
Presumably, finally,
These people have
the
already
person he
found
entrusted
all
her
the
to found
treasures
her,
they can find
sheltered
inside.
her for several
And those who
decades,
can't can only
and
target
even
other
became
people.
her lover.
Mo
Tinga,
she
also
gently
heard a
knelt
lot
down
of these
beside
things.
her.
But
Brother,
this time, the
this is
people
probably
fighting
the
each
last
other
time I'll call
had
you brother.
extremely high
Today,
cultivation levels.
I came here because
most of them
Tinga
were in the
came to
core
collect your
formation
remains,
and there were
I
very
also
few
came to give you
in
an
the foundation
explanation.
building realm.
I've done what I promised
She thought
you all
about
these
Jade
years.
Palace again.
Tinga
So
has
many
already
nascent
grown up
soul
and become a core
cultivators went
formation
there for the
cultivator.
same unique
My
treasure.
responsibility
So
has
a fierce
finally
battle
come
was
to an end
inevitable.
today.
This
He
time,
turned to look at
even if
Mo
the restrictions
Tinga
on Demonic Mountain
smiled
didn't collapse
and held her hand tightly.
many people would
He
have
then
died.
continued to say,
The two of them
"Brother
had
Yi, achieved their purpose
That
of
day,
entering demonic
you said
mountain.
that if your daughter
So they
had
didn't want to get
pure
involved in
constitution
these
and
things. Whenever they
spiritual
encountered a
roots,
fight,
I'd be
they
in charge
avoided
of dual
but they were
cultivation.
lucky. I'm well aware of what you're implying.
They often encountered
Although
fights
today's
where
result
both sides
is the
were
same,
injured or
I want to
even
make it clear
killed.
to you that
So they took a
Kinga
lot of
and I
Chinko and
love
bags
each other
along the way.
So this is
These
nothing to do
Chinko
with
and
you.
bags alone
You can rest
were
assured
already a great fortune. After picking up another batch of Chinko and bags, Tinga smiled until her eyes narrowed. It's really interesting. They fight to death, but we're better off picking up ready-made treasures. She also smiled and said shamelessly, if everyone was as smart as us, of course we wouldn't be able to pick up any treasures. Put them all away. Maybe there are some treasures inside. Tinga didn't stand on ceremony and put all the Chinko and bags into her bosom. There were so many of them. They might even be richer than her own net worth. Just as they were counting, they suddenly heard a muffled thunder in the sky. Qinshi looked up and saw that in the sky, where spiritual aura and devil aura intertwined, the wind and clouds surged and violently collided. The spiritual aura and devil aura in demonic mountain instantly became chaotic. Not good. The restrictions collapsed. Chapter 306. It wasn't his first time experiencing the collapse of restrictions, so Qinshi was very calm. He unfolded the three-yong real fire sword, spread the sword formation, and flew forward while pulling Mo Tinga. The flying cloud reached its maximum speed, flying towards the exit of Demonic Mountain. Along the way, countless cultivators flew towards the exit in unison. This was the time to escape, so everyone used their trump cards. No one dared to hold anything back. Even so, some cultivators who couldn't escape in time were sucked into the collapsing restrictions and instantly turned into black ashes. Mo Tinga saw with her own eyes that Daoist Kumu and Tong Tianyun, who came with them, were also sucked into the restrictions and died instantly. Not long after they entered Demonic Mountain, they were separated from those two people. Later, they learned from Jing Xingji that those two people indeed harbored evil intentions. They left Madame Feng in the lurch and watched as Lei Dongqing perished. But the two of them relied on that 10,000-year-old spiritual plant to hook up with a nascent soul cultivator and enter Immortal's ruins. Now that the two of them appeared here, they probably didn't get any benefits even if they helped the nascent soul cultivators. Shi and Qin Shi, who had nascent soul masters, didn't think about going in with Lord Daoist Jinghe. Did they really think those nascent soul cultivators would protect them for a 10,000-year-old spiritual herb? Maybe they knew, but their lifespans were about to run out, so they didn't care. The restrictions collapsed faster and faster, and the rumbling sounds were endless. Countless cultivators rushed towards the exit. Qinshi was calm at first, but he became anxious later on. Such a big movement was even more terrible than the one 80 years ago. Master was right. This time was more dangerous than last time. But no matter how fast they ran, they couldn't outrun the collapsing restrictions. Soon, the cultivators not far behind them were also sucked in, and their screams were endless. "No!" Mo Tinga shouted. "We can't escape like this." How could Qinshi not know that? But where could they find a safe place at this time? Last time, when the restrictions on Demonic Mountain collapsed, he and Yihai were lucky to hide in the cave on tens of thousands of feet peak. Otherwise, they definitely couldn't escape. At this time, he couldn't afford to hold back anymore. The sword formation spread out and shone brightly, blocking more and more drifting restrictions in the air. His hands didn't stop moving as he fished out several treasures from his chinquan bag. He patted some on himself and gave some to Mo Tinga. He said anxiously, "At least it can block them for a while." The sound of thunder resounded overhead. Mo Tinga's expression changed. She heard Qinshi say, "It's too late. I can only risk it." Right after he said that, he made a hand seal and circulated the spiritual aura in his body. He was about to use a secret technique. Mo Tinga was startled. Although she didn't know what kind of secret technique Qinshi was using, she could tell he was using his blood essence. Once such a spell was used, the best result would be a period of rest, but the worst result would be a regression in cultivation. He was already at the peak stage of the core formation realm. If his cultivation level regressed, he didn't know how long it would take for him to reach the nascent soul realm. "Senior brother, don't." Qinshi didn't pay attention to her. Several drops of blood essence were forced out of his body. He stretched out his hand and wiped it, and the blade of his sword instantly shone with a red light. Just as he was about to activate the three-yong real fire sword, his spiritual aura suddenly became unstable, and the red light on the three-yong real fire sword dimmed. His expression changed. He used his blood essence to search for Mo Tinga's whereabouts before, so he lost some of his strength. Now, he couldn't even use the secret technique. She was really anxious when he realized this. He was very calm before because of this secret technique. At worst, he could take Mo Tinga out even if he got injured. But he didn't expect that he couldn't use the secret technique because he used his blood essence before. "Tinga," His mind was full of thoughts. In the end, Qin clenched his teeth, pulled Mo Tinga's hand, and said, "If we can't escape, we'll die together." He didn't wait for her to answer, and once again turned into a flight light, flying towards the exit. Their lives were at stake now. All of a sudden, Mo Tinga pulled his hand back and stopped. "Tinga." Qin was anxious. "What's wrong?" Mo Tinga looked up with a solemn expression. Black clouds surged and covered the whole sky. Obviously, the initial instability of the restrictions triggered the collapse of a large area of the restrictions in the sky. If this continued, it would only take a while for the restrictions to collapse here. Although Qin's flying cloud was extremely fast, it was really hard to say whether he could escape or not. Qin was anxious. "If we don't leave now, it'll be too late." Mo Tinga didn't say anything. She held his waist, gathered spiritual aura on her fingertips, and touched the space between her eyebrows. A huge round bead loomed between her eyebrows, emitting a hazy white light. Qin's eyes widened. The sound of wind and thunder in the sky became more intense. The speed at which the restrictions collapsed was faster than they expected. People were constantly being sucked in. They didn't even have time to scream before they disappeared without a trace. Mo Tinga silently recited an incantation and cast the incantation on the bead. The white light suddenly exploded, engulfing the two of them. When the white light disappeared, she was stunned. Bamboo house, bamboo forest, a gentle breeze, a flowing brook, and the smell of medicine lingering around the tip of his nose. It was a somewhat familiar but completely different scene. After entering the virtual sky world, Mo Tinga breathed a sigh of relief. Feifei wagged its tail, threw itself into her arms, and squeaked. She smiled and hugged Feifei affectionately. In the end, she patted its head and released Xiaohua from the spiritual beast bag, letting the two of them play. She took a closer look. The medicinal field hadn't been cleaned for a long time, and weeds had grown in it again. She took out 2 stone sculpture puppets from her Chinquan bag and told them to clean up the medicinal field. These 2 puppets had extraordinary strength, so they were just right to do these chores for her. When she was done, she looked up and saw that she had finally come back to his senses. There was shock in his eyes, but also understanding. When his eyes met hers, he sighed and said, "I finally understand. Turns out this is your biggest secret." Mo Tinga smiled, pulled him into the bamboo house, picked up a praying mat, and threw it to him. "You don't need to ask about other things, right?" She gradually understood. Her pill concocting skills, her medicinal pills, her 10,000-year-old spiritual plants, her spiritual beast cultivation levels, and all her puzzling things originated from here. The virtual sky world. He thought for a while and asked, "Where did you get this virtual sky world? It shouldn't be a gift from your great ancestor, right?" Mo Tinga shook her head. "No." Zhong Yuling said there were only 2 known virtual sky worlds, and both of them belonged to deification cultivators. How could he have given her one? Even if he had one, she was only a foundation-building cultivator back then, so he wouldn't have given it to her. "Then how did you get it?" Mo Tinga thought for a while, then said, "It can be considered a fated chance. When I got it, I didn't know what it was. Later, when I entered my great ancestor's virtual sky world, I realized it was this thing." At that time, she nodded in understanding. "No wonder your cultivation level rose so fast from then on. It turned out it wasn't only because you obtained the art of the origin, but also because you obtained such a heaven-defying treasure." Mo Tinga smiled when she saw that his tone was full of emotion, but there was no greed in his eyes. Letting him know such a big secret was originally a gamble. Fortunately, he hadn't betrayed her trust so far. Aren't you going to ask why I didn't tell you?" She smiled when he heard this question. He reached out to touch her face and said, "Do you need to ask? Even if it was me, I wouldn't tell such a big secret to others. An ordinary man is innocent, but treasuring a jade ring becomes a crime. This is especially true in the cultivation world. It's best that you know how to protect yourself." Mo Tinga looked up at him and asked, "So, if I never told you, You wouldn't blame me? Qin, she shook his head. Why would I blame you? Even if you never told me for the rest of your life, I wouldn't blame you. In fact, I think it's already quite risky for you to bring me here today. Are you so sure I won't have any bad intentions after seeing this virtual sky world? Tinga hesitated for a moment, then answered, I didn't have time to think about anything else just now. I just thought we couldn't die there. Besides, this virtual sky world has already recognized me as its master. You can't hurt me here. If I were really scheming, I wouldn't have hurt you here. Qin, she said. Qin, she said, if nothing happens to me here after I learn your secret, but I imprison you and interrogate you after we go out, what would you do? His tone was harsh and even accusatory. Tinga was stunned and asked, Isn't it good for me to trust you? Qin, she sighed and said, I know you trust me, but it's hard to judge a person's heart. Trust sometimes comes with a price, and the price you have to pay is too high. If you're not careful, you'll be crushed to pieces. Seeing that Tinga lowered her head after being scolded, Qin, she smiled again. Of course, I can be an exception, but there can't be a next time, understand? Tinga smiled. Of course there won't be a next time. If it weren't for you, I wouldn't have brought you here. She had thought about this question many times. If it weren't for today's life-threatening situation, she wouldn't have brought Qinshi here. In fact, after bringing him here, she was also nervous, but Qinshi's reaction just now made her feel that her trust was worth it. Thinking of today's dangerous situation, she asked worriedly, Master is still in Immortal's ruins. Will he be in danger? This question made Qin-shi silent for a while. How could he not be worried? But now that the great restriction on Demonic Mountain had collapsed, they couldn't go out. Master won't die so easily, he said. Let's take care of ourselves first. After a few days, when the restriction is stable, we'll look for Master's whereabouts. Tinga also didn't have any good ideas, so she could only do this. Feeling the heavy atmosphere between them, she smiled and said, Since we're here, I'll take you to see the medicinal field. My pill concocting skills aren't as good as yours, so you might be able to give me some advice on how to deal with these spiritual plants. As she spoke, she pulled him to the medicinal field and told him about some things in the virtual sky world. She looked at the densely packed medicinal plants in the medicinal field and was shocked for a long time. He then sighed and said, These medicinal plants are enough for a big cultivation group to use for hundreds of years. If they're not picked excessively, they'll be enough to support a cultivation group to dominate the celestial pole. That's true, but I don't dare to take them out. A 10,000-year-old spiritual plant can make nascent soul cultivators fight for it. With so many, I don't know what kind of turmoil it will cause. And you're right. Qin, she agreed. Even if they rot here, we can't take them out casually. Otherwise, not only will you be in trouble, but the celestial pole will also be in chaos. He lowered his head and looked at the surrounding medicinal fields. There were many spirit herbs that he had only heard of in legends, but had never seen before. These spirit herbs had been trimmed, and their ages ranged from 10,000 years to 1,000 years to a few hundred years. Some of them had only just sprouted. You said the virtual sky world has existed for hundreds of thousands of years. But why are the oldest spiritual plants only tens of thousands of years old? Tinga learned about this from the memory in the virtual sky world. Spiritual plants also have a lifespan. Generally, their lifespan ranges from 10,000-year-old to tens of thousands of years. So it's best to pick them and refine them into medicinal pills when they're 10,000-year-old. Because at that time, their medicinal properties have reached their limit. If they continue to grow, they'll die. I see. It was Qinshi's first time hearing about this. In the current cultivation world, 10,000-year-old spiritual plants rarely appeared, so no one really knew about this. Standing in the middle of the medicinal field, Tinga looked at the many spiritual plants that had reached 10,000 years old. She then looked at the two busy stone sculpture puppets and said with a smile, Since we can't go out, help me tidy up the medicinal field. Chapter 307. After the big restriction on Demonic Mountain collapsed, many smaller restrictions followed suit. Almost half of Demonic Mountain was involved. Imo, Tinga, and Qin, she were lucky. They entered the virtual sky world in time and weren't affected. The others, however, weren't so lucky. Very few of them managed to escape Demonic Mountain in time. Even many nascent soul cultivators perished inside. This trip to Demonic Mountain was even more tragic than the one over 80 years ago. The casualties of high-level cultivators were disastrous, even more serious than the demonic beast riot last time. The Celestial Pole was in an uproar. Of course, the two of them didn't know about these things yet. While hiding in the virtual sky world, Imo Tienga occasionally opened it to look at the situation outside. She found that the chain reaction caused by the collapse of the restriction hadn't stopped. The sky fell, the earth cracked, lightning flashed, and the whole demonic mountain shook. Since they couldn't go out, the two of them had to put aside the things outside for the time being and live their own lives in the virtual sky world. First of all, Qin lost some strength because he used his blood essence. Fortunately, the concentration of spiritual aura in the virtual sky world was extremely high, so it was faster to heal here than outside. But the strange thing was that Qin said the spiritual aura here had to be transformed by the art of 3 primordial cycles before he could quickly absorb it into his dantian. Otherwise, his cultivation speed wouldn't be much faster than outside. The two of them pondered this situation for a long time and finally guessed that the world had changed. Cultivation techniques had also evolved, and the virtual sky world still maintained the concentration of spiritual aura from the distant past era, which was why this situation occurred. Imo Tinga wasn't affected because she practiced cultivation techniques from the distant past era. As for Qin, his art of 3 primordial cycles originated from the distant past era. But Imo Tinga also thought that his pure yang technique came from Yuan Bao, who lived in Zhong Muling's virtual sky world all year round. So why couldn't he? After asking Qin, he also couldn't understand. Perhaps Yuan Bao thought he wouldn't enter the virtual sky world again, so he didn't tell him some trick? The two of them couldn't understand this problem with their cultivation levels, so they simply left it behind. In any case, it wasn't like they couldn't cultivate here. Secondly, since they couldn't leave the virtual sky world, Imo Tinga had nothing to do, so she simply tidied up the medicinal fields with Qin. She had picked many 10,000-year-old spiritual plants, but hadn't refined them into medicinal pills yet. There were still many spiritual plants growing in the medicinal fields. She instructed the 2 puppets to pick them one by one and reorganize the medicinal fields. These spirit grasses were refined into pills by them. Qin's pill concocting skills were also extremely high. With the two of them working together, their pill concocting speed became much faster. A year later, the medicinal fields were finally tidied up. At this time, Qin's injuries were almost healed, so Imo Tienga began to consider refining her natal magic weapon. Before this, she originally planned to ask the group's tools refiners to refine tools for her, but she didn't know how long she'd have to stay in the virtual sky world, so she could only rely on herself for everything. Thus, she began to learn tool refining again. However, her talent in tool refining really wasn't very good. There were spiritual plants everywhere in the virtual sky world, but there weren't many materials needed for tool refining. In the end, it was Qin who couldn't bear to see her like this, so he personally refined for her. Qin's talent in miscellaneous studies was higher than hers. Whether it was pill concocting, tool refining, or even talisman crafting, he had a considerable level of skill. However, he did not dare to be careless when it came to refining a natal magic treasure, so he spent a lot of time practicing again. The two of them slowly cultivated while learning how to refine weapons. Just like that, years passed by. In the beginning, Imo Tinga often went to see what was going on outside the virtual sky world, but the collapse of Demonic Mountain this time lasted for a long time. In the end, she only went to see it after a long time. When she opened the virtual sky world again and saw that it was still dark outside, Imo Tinga sighed. This was already the 5th year, but the restrictions were still unstable. She really didn't know when they could go out. Before the restrictions collapsed, Master went to Jade Palace. She didn't know whether he escaped or not. Jinji had been missing for several years at that time. Could he go back now? Don't think about it. When the time comes, you'll naturally be able to go out. Qin-Shi's voice came from behind her. Mo Tinga waved her sleeves, erased the scene outside, then turned around. Why did you come out? They failed to refine the heaven and earth fan once, so he shut himself in his room for many days. He said he couldn't fail again and had to carefully figure out the characteristics of the materials. Qin-Shi smiled. I finished my research, so I came out. Oh, Mo Tinga's eyes brightened. Then can we refine it again? And Qin-Shi thought for a moment and said, it should be possible. How's your cultivation these days? Very smooth. Mo Tinga reached out her hand. Take a look. Qin-Shi put his hand on her pulse and separated a wisp of spiritual aura to test her pulse. After a while, he withdrew his spiritual aura and said with a smile, your cultivation here is indeed twice the result with half the effort. With clear sky pills and the virtual sky world, her cultivation speed was simply fast compared to ordinary cultivators. Even if she encountered a bottleneck, she didn't need to worry too much with the experienced Qin-Shi guiding her. What about you? When will you form your nascent soul? The two of them were trapped here and didn't know when they could go out. Qin-Shi's cultivation level had reached the peak, and his mentality had also adjusted. It could be said that forming his nascent soul was already a matter of course. This question made Qin-Shi ponder for a long time. In the end, he said, when I form my nascent soul, I'll definitely use the art of 3 primordial cycles as the main method, so forming my nascent soul here won't affect me. But there's no need to worry. Let's refine your natal magic weapon first. Mo Tinga said with a smile. The youngest known person to form their nascent soul in the celestial pole was 208 years old. You're 206 years old now. Forming your nascent soul now can still set a record, but it won't be so sensational in a few years. Don't you want to break this record? Qin-Shi shook his head and said with a faint smile, what's the point of fighting for these empty titles? There's no harm in delaying it for a year or two. Mo Tinga felt relieved upon hearing what he said. In the past few years, Qin-Shi's mentality was too impatient, so he failed to form his nascent soul again and again. Now that he was so calm, it could be seen that his mentality was stable. In that case, there wouldn't be any big obstacles when he formed his nascent soul. In fact, Qin-Shi's mentality was originally very stable. In the past few years, he completely walked into the trap he set himself, so a loophole appeared in his mentality. The root of this loophole was Mo Tinga. Now that the two of them were already in love, he naturally restored his original calm and tranquil state of mind. The two of them talked for a while, then went back to their respective cultivations. Their cultivation techniques didn't conflict with each other. One was a pure yang cultivator, while the other was a pure yin cultivator, so they complemented each other. Therefore, they didn't need to use 2 separate cultivation rooms and could directly cultivate together in Mo Tinga's original cultivation room. After a day of adjusting their breaths, both their spiritual aura and mentality were restored to their peak, so they prepared to refine magic weapons. Refining a natal magic weapon was different from refining ordinary magic weapons. Even if ordinary magic weapons needed to recognize their master, the owner didn't need to be present during the refining process. Natal magic weapons, on the other hand, had to be refined with a cultivator's blood essence. Therefore, although Qin-Shi took charge of refining, he still needed Mo Tinga's cooperation. After a failed refinement, Qin-Shi was particularly cautious this time. For example, when she first entered Qin-Shi's school, she also liked the hairpins and rings he gave her. But after enjoying them, cultivation was still the most important thing. All right, let's try the power of the magic weapon first. Whether it's beautiful or not is secondary. Hearing Qin-Shi's reminder, Mo Tinga looked up and asked how. Qin-Shi thought about it and said, this treasure can trap and kill, and it can also trap and defend. How about I try defending first? Okay. Mo Tinga waved the heaven and earth fan and spread its surface. In an instant, the fan was overflowing with light,
reflecting a sparkling and lifelike picture of mountains and rivers. Qin Shi stretched out his left hand and concentrated. With a flash of golden light, the three-yong real fire sword appeared in his palm. He shook his arm, and the sword turned into a golden light. Surrounded by the real fire, it circled around him twice, then suddenly changed direction and rushed towards Mo Tinga. Mo Tinga watched carefully and immediately used the heaven and earth fan. The picture of mountains and rivers suddenly enlarged and shrouded the sword light like real mountains and rivers. After being surrounded by the mountains and rivers, the sword light stopped and revealed the true form of the three-yong real fire sword. The sword began to move left and right, but it couldn't break through the seemingly invisible mountains and rivers. Finally, Qin Shi withdrew the three-yong real fire sword and said helplessly, "The sword itself can't break through. It seems I have to use my sword." Mo Tinga was overjoyed that the power of the heaven and earth fan was extraordinary. Even if it was only the three-yong real fire sword itself, ordinary early-stage core formation cultivators couldn't block it. After this test, she had great confidence in the heaven and earth fan. Chapter 308. Qin Shi's three-yong real fire sword was also a natal magic weapon. Although it also used sword moves, it was different from a sword cultivator's sword. Generally, sword cultivators had already chosen their main sword when they were in the foundation-building realm, or even the aura refining realm. After that, they couldn't leave this sword for the rest of their lives. Their natal sword was constantly nourished and refined, and its rank would also constantly improve. As their cultivation level increased, it would become more and more powerful. This was similar to natal magic weapons, but natal magic weapons could only be refined after they reached the core formation realm, while sword cultivators could have their natal swords when they were in the aura refining realm. Because of this, sword cultivators were often stronger than ordinary cultivators. Of course, it wasn't only beneficial. If a cultivator's natal magic weapon was damaged, it would often affect the cultivator himself. If a sword cultivator's sword was damaged, the result would be more serious than that of an ordinary cultivator. If it was light, they would be seriously injured. If it was heavy, they would die. Moreover, all the skills of a sword cultivator were on their sword. If they lost their sword, even if they could keep their life, their cultivation level would most likely be crippled. As for Qin Shi, although he used the three-yong real fire sword as a magic weapon, he didn't rely on it as much as sword cultivators did. His strongest skill wasn't his sword moves. His three-yong real fire sword was extremely powerful, which often made people mistakenly think his sword moves were very powerful. In fact, his real killing move was the three-yong real fire on his sword. After explaining this to Mo Tinga, the three-yong real fire sword in his hand burst into a blazing red light and rushed toward the heaven and earth fan. Mo Tinga unfolded the heaven and earth fan, and the mountains and rivers turned solid, completely surrounding the three-yong real fire sword. Under the heavy pressure of the mountains and rivers, the sword couldn't break through. At that moment, the sword suddenly glowed red. Qin Shi made a sword art, and the three-yong real fire sword came out. Mo Tinga was very anxious. The mountains and rivers pressed down and firmly pressed the sword, but the three-yong real fire couldn't block it no matter what. She only felt a threatening aura rising to the sky, and her whole body was surrounded. She circulated her spiritual aura, and the spiritual aura shield of the art of primordial singular energy lit up, but it couldn't block this heat. It only lasted for a while before the spiritual aura shield was also burned. The moment the shield was broken, Qin Shi shook his arm and withdrew the three-yong real fire sword. Mo Tinga stood for a while, calmed down a bit, and also withdrew the heaven and earth fan. Although she knew his three-yong real fire sword was very powerful, she didn't know it was this powerful. His technique was very simple and could hardly be considered a technique. However, it was precisely because there was no technique that it was not easy to break through. This was because this was a battle of real strength. If one couldn't win against Chu Yang's three-yong real fire, then they could only be defeated. However,
Shu Yang's body was filled with pure yang spiritual energy. After cultivating the 3 yang real fire, its destructive power was even greater than that of the sun real fire. You don't have to be depressed. Seeing that she hadn't spoken for a long time, Qinshi smiled and said, not to mention the fact that my 3 yang real fire sword has been nourished for more than 100 years. But based on the gap between our cultivation levels, wouldn't I be too inferior if I couldn't even defeat a cultivator who just formed her gold core? Mo Tiange regained her senses. It wasn't that she had to compete with Qinshi. It was just that she was shocked after suddenly witnessing his strength. This also made her realize that she was still very far from the limits of what a core formation cultivator could achieve. Thinking of this, she smiled, held the heaven and earth fan, and asked, "What do you think after trying it?" Qinshi thought for a moment, then said, "It seems your heaven and earth fan has a strong restraining effect on magic weapons. If you encounter sword cultivators in the future, I don't think you'll be at a disadvantage. But when it comes to magic arts, it hasn't used the word trap yet." Mo Tiange also knew that the heaven and earth fan was originally a kind of magic weapon conceived by Mo Yaoqing, but it lacked actual examples. She still needed to figure out how to use it by herself. The word trap alone could be used for both offense and defense, so it wasn't something she could figure out in a short time. Okay, let's try the effect of the attack again. Qinshi waved his sleeve, and the 3 yang real fire sword turned into several sword lights that circled around him. Mo Tiange nodded, then opened the heaven and earth fan again. This time, it was completely different from before. Smoke and water rushed out, and the mountains and rivers seemed to come alive in an instant. Even the flowers and birds inside appeared real. Qinshi was stunned for a moment. Just like that, the world suddenly changed. He looked around and found that the scenery around him was exactly the same as the mountains and rivers on the heaven and earth fan, as if he himself had entered the painting. Although he had long known this was the illusory formation on the heaven and earth fan, what he saw and heard in front of him was exactly the same as the real one, so he was still a little shocked. It was really unexpected for a magic weapon that had just been refined to have this kind of power. Thinking up to this point, he frowned and looked around carefully, looking for flaws. Mo Tiange, who was outside the illusory formation, saw Qin. She turned around for a while inside the illusory formation. He seemed to have found something and showed a smile. Then he used the sword formation, and the red light shone brightly. A kind of invincible power spread out. She hurriedly operated her spiritual aura, trying to suppress Qinshi's counterattack, but the gap between their cultivation levels was obvious. Qinshi's 3 yang real fire still slowly spread out and finally engulfed the mountains and rivers. This time, she failed even more miserably than the last time. Last time, Qinshi could see it, so he could take back the 3 yang real fire in time. This time, when he broke the formation, he couldn't see it clearly. The 3 yang real fire burned, so Mo Tiange had to give up her defense and escape the range of the 3 yang real fire in a sorry state. When the mountains and rivers dispersed, Qinshi took back the 3 yang real fire sword. Seeing Mo Tiange standing there thoughtfully, he asked with a smile, "What's wrong? Are you shocked?" Mo Tiange looked away and said in a daze, "Magic weapons alone aren't enough." Qinshi smiled. The 3 yang real fire disappeared and returned to his dantian. He walked closer and said, "Of course, magic weapons alone aren't enough. We're not sword cultivators. We only need to cultivate our swords. We cultivate ourselves. If our cultivation levels aren't strong, our strength will be weak, and our magic weapons naturally won't be so powerful." Mo Tiange cheered up, unfolded the heaven and earth fan, and said with a smile, "In any case, this kind of magic weapon is already very strong. If I cultivate well, I'll only become stronger and stronger in the future." It's good that you understand. In terms of cultivation, Mo Tiange's ideas were very similar to his, so they got along very well. Even if there were some differences, they could slowly get used to each other. In the past 5 years, the two of them lived here in seclusion. Sometimes, when he thought about it carefully, he felt that these days were as perfect as a dream. They didn't have fierce personalities. When they were together, they were as calm as water. They were like companions, like teachers and friends, and they occasionally had tender feelings. He thought that was enough. Of course, it wasn't like they didn't have friction. Tinga was strong and unwilling to rely on others. In this relationship, he often unconsciously acted strong. Occasionally, there would be quarrels, but later, they would compromise with each other and accept each other's ideas and practices. Sometimes, he thought that this was the perfect dual cultivation life he envisioned, right? On the long road to longevity, if there was no one to accompany him, he would always feel lonely in retrospect. But if he was entangled in love, it wasn't what he wanted. Now, he had someone to accompany him, and he could focus on cultivation. It was really the best. What are you looking at? Tinga couldn't help but ask, feeling creeped out by his warm eyes. She smiled and suddenly reached out to hold her waist, hugging her tightly. Let's make a blood oath. Tinga was stunned. She knew what a blood oath was. It was a kind of oath that most Tao companions made, similar to a spiritual peace contract. The two people who made a blood oath could never hurt each other. But the difference between a blood oath and a spiritual peace contract was that after a blood oath was made, there would be a sense between the two people. The other person would know clearly whether the other person was good or bad, dead or alive. She said slowly, I know, you definitely won't be willing to follow me all the time. So, when we occasionally separate with a blood oath between us, I can also know whether you're good or bad. Tinga was speechless for a while. She knew this was his compromise, tacitly agreeing to her freedom. Since he couldn't get an answer from her, she called again, Tinga. Tinga looked up and smiled brightly. Okay, establishing a blood oath was equivalent to a dual cultivation ceremony. It was even more important than a dual cultivation ceremony. Many dual cultivation partners did not establish a blood oath because most immortal cultivators were suspicious and did not dare to easily make such an oath that they could not get rid of in their entire lives. Therefore, with Tinga's consent, she was overjoyed. He thought for a moment and said, but we can't be too hasty. How about we wait until we go back and report to Master? This conclusion was quickly rejected by him. No, we don't know when we can go out. Tinga found it funny to see him struggling alone. Do we need to do this? Of course, making a blood oath should be more cautious than a dual cultivation ceremony. She said seriously. But I think it's fine as long as the two of us are sincere. You're right, but... He looked ashamed. This is too unfair for you. Unfair for what? Dual cultivation isn't something you could do alone. Tinga held his fingers and said seriously, we're not mortals, so why should we rigidly adhere to mortals' rules? She was stunned, but he didn't say anything. Although he went to Mount Taikong since he was a child, he grew up in a prince's mansion in the secular world, so some of his ideas inevitably carried traces of the secular world. For example, he was unconsciously strong in their relationship. On the contrary, although Tinga stayed in the secular world for a longer time, she was originally an ordinary village girl and didn't have much experience. Many things she heard only after she arrived in Kunwu, so her ideas were more similar to those of cultivators. After pondering for a while, she somewhat understood. He thought for a while and finally said, then, let's hold our own wedding. Huh? Wedding? She smiled and looked at her gently. You're right. It's fine as long as the two of us are sincere. But I always feel that a dual cultivation ceremony sounds a bit too cold, as if it's just for cultivation. That being the case, let's hold a wedding for the two of us, okay? How could Tinga say no? He was even more willing to give than she wanted. She remembered that when she was a child in family's village, her aunt always wanted Tianxiao to learn cooking and housekeeping so she could marry into a good family. She also vaguely thought about getting married. But at that time, she had already set foot on the path to immortality and learned about the existence of the cultivation world from books. She thought that when she went to the cultivation world in the future, she only needed to find a like-minded person. Later, when she arrived in Kunwu, she followed second uncle to many places to avoid the fate of becoming a human furnace. She only wanted to become stronger and didn't even dare to reveal her identity as a woman. So how could she think about dual cultivation? Later, when she met him, although she secretly had feelings for him, she told herself in her heart that she didn't need to think too much about hopeless things and just focused on cultivation. Everything she obtained today was something she originally thought she would never be able to obtain in her lifetime. All right, I'll listen to you. Chapter 309. In the cultivation world, there was no wedding in the secular world. They called it the dual cultivation ceremony. The dual cultivation ceremony meant that a man and a woman would become dual cultivation partners. This sounded very fair, but just as she said, it was filled with an ice-cold callousness. Dual cultivation was still for the sake of cultivation. Therefore, the most important thing to measure a cultivator's worth was their cultivation and talent. Very few of them dual cultivated for the sake of their feelings. Most of them did it for the sake of cultivation. Therefore, many dual cultivation partners would never establish a blood oath. In fact, when benefits were involved, the husband and wife would even turn against each other. Moreover, don't think that just because it wasn't called a wedding, there are no secular affairs. They still talked about dowry and betrothal gifts, but these were all replaced with spirit stones, spiritual treasures, and pills. If it was a marriage alliance between two cultivation clans, then it would be even more troublesome. When it came to haggling, it would definitely not lose to those mortals. Occasionally, Mo Tiange also recalled Yao Zixio and Shan Ruan, whom she met in Ziwei's Immortal's Cave. Although they were cultivators, their marriages were even more complicated than mortals. Of course, for people like Mo Tiange and Qin, she who didn't belong to any clans and had the same master, it would be much simpler. But no matter how simple it was, Mo Tiange was still somewhat opposed to the so-called dual cultivation ceremony. She knew that although she and Qin, she were martial siblings, and they were cultivators in the same realm now, the gap between them wasn't just a little. A cultivator who had reached the peak of the core formation stage and was very likely to advance to the nascent soul stage after a single session of secluded meditation was completely different from a cultivator who had just reached the core formation stage. The former might be able to enter the nascent soul stage in one go and become the pillar of the sect, but the latter still had to rely on the sect. Of course, she believed that one day she would also form her nascent soul. But what about now? If she really went back to report this to her master and held a dual cultivation ceremony, she would become the topic of conversation among fellow disciples and even outsiders. They would talk about the gap between them and their possible outcomes. She didn't mind other people's opinions, but she didn't like the feeling of being judged. So, when he said that she should hold a wedding for the two of them, she was actually very happy. Since they didn't have any wedding clothes, the two of them found some red clothes from the Chinquan bags they picked up on Demonic Mountain. They made some changes and used them as wedding clothes. If there were no red candles, he would use the fire obsidian stone, which was used to forge weapons, as a red candle. There were no guests, only two stone sculpture puppets observing the ceremony from the side. There were no ceremonial officials. Xiaohua and Feifei were witnesses. Heaven and earth as the witness, the sun and moon as the medium. Dear Master, I raise my cup in a toast. From then on, they were husband and wife. Then, he swore a blood oath. Blood essence exchange, you have me in you, I have you in me. After the wedding, the couple sat in the bamboo forest by the stream. There was no sun and moon rotation inside the virtual sky world. So she came up with an idea. He wanted her to use an art to tear open the sky inside the virtual sky world. Outside, Demonic Mountain was still shrouded in darkness. Devil aura intertwined, making it seem like night had fallen. Lightning flashed and thunder rumbled outside, but the scenery inside was different. The two of them sat for a long time before she said with a sigh, "Looks like we'll have to be trapped here for at least 2 to 3 years." Mo Tiange had long been mentally prepared for this. They had been trapped here for 5 years. In the beginning, the earth shook and the mountains collapsed. Even now, the restrictions were still occasionally triggered. 2 to 3 years was already a conservative estimate. If the restrictions remained unstable, it might take more than 10 years. After more than 10 years, the people outside would probably think that they were dead, right? If Master was still here, with the natal spirit lamp in hand, of course, he would know that they were still alive. But if Master did not escape, thinking of this, Tinga couldn't help but worry. I don't know if Master escaped. She smiled, put his arm around her waist, and said, "Don't worry too much. Although Master is usually unreliable, he's faster than anyone else when it comes to escaping. Besides, Master has lived for almost 1,000 years. He's seen more things and experienced more dangers than we do. He won't die here so easily." Tinga accepted his explanation. She knew Master's ability, so although she was worried, she still thought Master could escape. What made her the most uneasy was Jinji. After thinking for a while, Tinga asked, "Did you leave Jinji's blood essence behind?" She shook his head. "He's only in the foundation building realm. According to convention, he won't leave his natal spirit lamp until he forms his gold core." Tinga was also aware of this point, but she was just asking with hope in her heart. When we entered Demonic Mountain, Jinji had been missing for many years. I don't know if he has returned. She also couldn't answer this question. Yi Jinji was his disciple. Although he didn't bring him up, he followed him as soon as he built his foundation. He knew Jinji lacked experience and acted childishly, so when Jinji wanted to go out to gain experience, he agreed very much. But Jinji's cultivation level was low, and he didn't have enough experience, so it was really hard to say whether he could turn danger into safety in times of crisis. In the end, she said, "Apart from Master, Jinji is the closest person to us. If something happened to him, we should have sensed it, but we haven't sensed it, so he should be fine." And Tinga knew he was just comforting her. Cultivators sense destiny by chance, so they couldn't sense everything. But in any case, it was good that they didn't sense anything bad. Some things were powerless and could only be left to fate. Seeing that she was troubled, she pulled her into his arms and suddenly lowered his head to say in her ear, "It's useless to worry about these things. Let's think about what we should do now." "Do what?" Tinga thought for a while, then said, "Concocting medicinal pills, cultivating, studying cultivation techniques, not that." She smiled. "Apart from these, don't we have anything else to do?" From his gaze, Tinga suddenly realized something, so she immediately shut her mouth and stopped talking. She couldn't help but laugh at her reaction. "You don't have to feel uneasy. We're not together for dual cultivation or anything else. If you don't want to, we could talk about it later." Tinga hesitated for a moment, then said in a low voice, "Since we're already husband and wife, what's there to be unwilling about?" Hearing this, she was delighted and reached out to hug her. "So you wait?" Tinga looked up and stopped him. She smiled slyly and said, "But we haven't made things clear yet." "Huh?" She was stunned and puzzled. "What do you want to say?" "There are a lot of things to say. For example, what's your cultivation technique? What's the dual cultivation technique you mentioned? How many secrets do you have?" Seeing that he didn't speak, Tinga glared at him. "What? You can't tell me?" "Fine." She said helplessly. "But even if I have some secrets, you should know most of them. For example? For example, the changes in my physique, my cultivation technique, my yang spiritual bead. Don't you already know about all of these?" The yang spiritual bead in his body was his biggest secret, and Tinga had long known about this secret. Tinga thought about it and felt he was right. She had long guessed the secret of the yang spiritual bead. Later, her master even deliberately told her about it. "Then what about the dual cultivation technique you mentioned last time? You should at least tell me about it, right?" She always pretended to be mysterious about this matter, saying she would know when the time came. Now that the two of them were husband and wife, it should be time, right? She smiled. This time, he didn't refuse and asked her, "Do you have the art of Sunu?" Tinga nodded. Both her master and him knew about this matter. She put his hand into his Chinkoan bag, took out a jade slip, and handed it to her. Take a look at this. Mo Tinga looked at him in bewilderment. She took the jade slip and probed it with her divine sense. In the next second, she was shocked. This is Qin, she smiled and said, the yin and yang dual cultivation technique Senior Yuan Bao gave me. This cultivation technique was composed of 3 parts. The first part was the pure yang technique, the second part was the art of Sinu, and the third part was the yin and yang dual cultivation technique. Mo Tinga carefully compared it. Her art of Sinu was basically the same as the art of Sinu in this cultivation technique, with only some small changes. She pondered for a while. Her version might have been modified by Mo Yaoqing according to her cultivation situation, or it might have been obtained by Mo Yaoqing from her cultivation group. So, it was originally a different version from Yuan Bao's. Reading up to this point, Mo Tinga was happy on one side and worried on the other. She was happy because dual cultivation for people with pure yang and pure yin constitutions was an extremely fast cultivation speed. This yin and yang dual cultivation technique will be extremely beneficial for the two of them. But she was worried because she didn't simply have a pure yin constitution. It could even be said that her spiritual roots of the origin had a greater impact on her aptitude than her pure yin constitution. If she gave up on the art of the origin and focused on cultivating this yin and yang dual cultivation technique, the gains wouldn't make up for the losses. She noticed that her brows were tightly knitted and her expression was constantly changing. He asked what's wrong. Mo Tinga sighed and told him her thoughts honestly. She smiled and said, "Are you stupid? Who said you can only cultivate one cultivation technique? I remember you also have the art of the origin given by your great ancestor, right? The cultivation technique you're cultivating now combines the two, so it's naturally the most efficient. But if you cultivate them separately, the difference won't be too big." Mo Tinga was suddenly enlightened. Right, how could I forget? The Sunu art of the origin was a cultivation technique that combined the Taiyuan record and the art of Sunu. However, Zhong Muling also said that this cultivation technique didn't conflict with the 2 original cultivation techniques. Combining them into one would allow her cultivation efficiency to reach the highest, but if she cultivated them separately, it would only take her a bit more time. Before this, since she already had the Sunu art of the origin, she didn't need to cultivate them separately. But now it was different. With this yin and yang dual cultivation technique, even if she cultivated them separately, the effect would still be excellent. Her mind raced, and she said, right, maybe we don't need to cultivate them separately. The Sunu art of the origin was comprehended by a deification cultivator, so maybe it could be applied to the dual cultivation technique. Besides, I'm about to form my nascent soul. She also thought of a possibility. After I form my nascent soul, my comprehension of cultivation techniques will be incomparable to today's. We'll know when we try it. Mo Tinga smiled. If that's the case, it's completely feasible even if there's a gap in our cultivation levels. She nodded and looked down at her. He suddenly said, why don't we try it now? Mo Tinga was about to say she hadn't looked at the cultivation technique carefully, but she suddenly realized what he meant by try it. Her cheeks immediately burned. We'll talk about this later. No need to talk about it anymore. She stopped her. This day will come. Chapter 310. The 2 of them were trapped in a paradise-like place, bowed to heaven and earth, and made a blood oath. Some things happen naturally. As a result, their originally peaceful and warm days were occasionally filled with sweetness. They were an enthusiastic people. Even though they committed to dual cultivation, they only enjoyed the faint warmth. Mo Tinga was very satisfied with this kind of life. She didn't feel too lonely, and it didn't affect her cultivation. They were together, accompanied each other, discussed cultivation, and exchanged thoughts. However, not long after they were together, she found something changed. Next was Mo Tinga. She also felt as if there was something stirring inside her dantian. They both noticed the restlessness in each other's eyes. Mo Tinga asked, "Is there something wrong with you?" She frowned, nodded, and asked, "What about you? Do you also feel?" And Mo Tinga was a bit distressed. "Well, what should I do?" Will the spiritual aura I get this way be unstable? How could it be? This question made Qin laugh. If there was a problem, why were there so many people in the cultivation world who practiced dual cultivation? Don't think too much. Just cultivate well. After a pause, he said, I originally planned to advance to the nascent soul realm after a while, but now I can't wait. Huh? The spiritual aura in my body is surging, and my dantian and meridians can no longer hold it. If I let it go, it's not good for me, so I have to advance to the nascent soul realm. Oh, Tinga understood. When spiritual aura accumulated to a certain level, the body would automatically request to advance. Presumably, he was at this stage now. Then when will you advance to the nascent soul realm? Qin thought for a while, then said, 3 days later. I can't suppress this spiritual aura for too long. So soon? Qin stroked her head and smiled. I can't help it. I didn't expect dual cultivation would be like this. Suddenly obtaining so much spiritual aura must be uncomfortable for you. It's better to enter closed-door meditation while I'm advancing to the nascent soul realm. Maybe I can advance to the middle stage of the core formation realm in one go. And Tinga nodded and accepted his suggestion. She had been in the core formation realm for 6 or 7 years, and she had been adapting. Now that her natal magic weapon was formed and she gradually learned various cultivation techniques, it was time to continue her closed-door meditation. To enter the intermediate stage of the completion level in one go was very difficult. Ordinary cultivators would need at least 100 years to reach the early stage of core formation. Even geniuses would need 30 to 40 years. Of course, it wasn't like there was no hope at all. The virtual sky world had rich spiritual aura, countless clear sky pills, and a yang spiritual aura she obtained from Qin. If her cultivation went smoothly, she might really be able to advance to the middle stage of the core formation realm during this period of time. But if he did that, there might be a risk of his realm becoming unstable. However, no matter what, the spiritual energy was unstable, so she had to go into seclusion. After the two came to an agreement, they began to prepare for their secluded cultivation in the next 3 days. Over the years, they had refined a lot of elixirs while cleaning up the herb field, so they didn't need to refine elixirs on the spot. Therefore, it was easy to prepare. They just needed to rearrange the cultivation room for their seclusion. Advancing to the nascent soul realm wasn't the same as cultivating on a normal day. They definitely couldn't be disturbed by others, not even if Tinga just watched from the side. Therefore, they had to have a separate cultivation room. For this reason, Tinga deliberately gave Qin his spirit-gathering formation from the Xuanji formation book and asked him to arrange it in a separate cultivation room. Although the formation Qin she used was good, he was still inferior to Tinga in this aspect. The Xuanji formation book could be said to be the best secret formation book in the Celestial Pole. With this book, Tinga's attainments in formations could be ranked first even in the Celestial Pole. It only took them 1 day to prepare everything. For the next 2 days, the two of them didn't do anything else. They just strolled around, chatted, and relaxed. The state of mind was very important in advancing to the nascent soul realm, and one's mood was also one of the states of mind. On the 3rd day, she looked at the time and finally said, "It's almost time." Seeing his serious expression, Tinga couldn't help but ask, "Are you okay?" She looked down at her. "What's okay?" Tinga pondered in her heart for a while, then comforted him. "Your cultivation is perfect now, and you're full of spiritual aura. Advancing to the nascent soul realm is just a matter of time, so you don't need to be nervous." She paused for a moment, then smiled. "Are you afraid I'll have a shadow in my heart because I failed to advance to the nascent soul realm 3 times? Tinga smiled embarrassedly. "I've never advanced to the nascent soul realm, so I can't give you any advice." Before she could finish, she heaved a sigh and hugged her. Tinga thought for a moment, then swallowed the rest of her words. She also reached out and hugged his waist. The two of them hugged in silence for a while. Then she said softly, "I understand your feelings. Don't worry, I know what I should do." In, Tinga answered softly. She knew he always had his own ideas. Now that his inner demons had been broken, he knew what he should do. However, she still couldn't help but worry. She had never felt this way before. It wasn't that she hadn't worried about others. When she was a child, it was her mother, and later, it was second uncle. But for these two people, even if she worried about them, she didn't have this kind of feeling in her heart all the time. She always thought her feelings were very calm, but now she realized that calm could also be very strong. She couldn't help but hug him tighter, not because she was afraid of losing him, but because she wanted to be closer to him. Under her cheeks, Qinshi's chest rose and fell, making her feel warm and reliable. Time passed bit by bit. After an unknown amount of time, she finally let go of him. You go in. She didn't move. He still hugged her waist tightly. Senior Marshall brother? After a long time, he heaved a long sigh. For the first time, I feel a little reluctant to enter closed-door meditation. Tinga didn't say anything, but a smile appeared on her face. It felt really good to have a response to her feelings. What are you afraid of? She said softly. When you come out, I'll still be here. But we won't see each other for several years, he said in a low voice. What he said stunned Tinga, but she soon heaved a sigh. This was what cultivators were like. Unless their cultivation levels were similar in the future and they practiced the same cultivation technique, they could avoid the situation where one of them entered closed-door meditation and couldn't see the other for several years. She didn't think the two of them had to stick together, but the feeling of being separated for several years, or even several decades from time to time, was indeed not very pleasant. However, no matter what happened in the future, soul formation had to be separated. Thinking of this, Tinga urged him again. It's getting late. Why don't you go in? She still didn't move. Tinga was a bit anxious. This time, he didn't choose the time to form his nascent soul. His body had reached its limit. If he delayed for too long, she didn't know whether it would be bad for him or not. She pushed him. Senior Marshall brother. She moved and said, What did you call me? Tinga was stunned. What? I suddenly remembered we're husband and wife now. Shouldn't you change the way you call me? Tinga couldn't adapt to the sudden change of topic. But you're my senior Marshall brother. Otherwise, what would I call you? She lowered his head and chuckled. Although there aren't many people in Xianxing school who call me senior Marshall brother, there are still a few. I want a name that only belongs to you. The intimacy in his words made Tinga's face burn. What did you say? She looked down in her eyes and said softly, Call me husband, okay? Tinga felt her face was burning. She controlled herself for a long time and finally squeezed out two words. No. She raised his eyebrows, puzzled. Why? No means no. This, although she knew they were husband and wife, she just couldn't say the word husband and wife. It was too intimate just once. Can I say it? No. Tinga turned her head to the side, resolutely. No, she couldn't say it. She persisted and turned her head back. I'm going to enter closed-door meditation and won't see you for several years. You still won't say it? No, you really don't want it. I don't want it. She wouldn't let go no matter what. So she could only sigh. Fine, it's fine if you don't want to say it, but you have to show me something. Seeing that she didn't respond, she continued to stare at her. Tinga clenched her teeth, pulled his head down, and quickly pressed her lips against his. Okay, woo. Before she could finish her sentence, he quickly pulled her back. This time, it wasn't a light touch like a dragonfly touching the water, but a deep kiss with their lips and tongues intertwined. You. She wanted to say something, but as soon as she opened her mouth, it was blocked. The tip of his tongue slipped between her lips and teeth, entangling her tightly. Her breathing became rapid in an instant. Don't talk. She whispered between her lips and teeth, then kissed her again. One of his arms wrapped around her waist, pressing her tightly against his body, and the other hand groped around her waist. Tinga knew what he wanted to do. She felt he was too impulsive, but she didn't firmly stop him. Although she had long been prepared to be separated often, they had just gotten married after all. After making the blood oath, They also had skin contact, but that first time was almost a disaster. The two of them had lived for half of their lives, but their love affairs were hazy. They only roughly knew how to do it. So how could they know how to enjoy the beauty of skin contact? After that, although they kissed, hugged, and tangled with each other, they were no longer as close as before. Those kisses, hugs, and entanglement actually made them feel good. He finally found his belt, pulled it open, and took off the clothes one by one with ease. Senior Marshall brother. The moment her back touched the table, Tinga tried her best to prop herself up and said hurriedly, "You should enter closed-door meditation. I told you not to talk." She lowered his head and kissed her again. Her clothes fell from his fingers. Under the cover of the Taoist robe was a woman's soft and graceful curves. Her skin was exposed to the air, but it made her a little uneasy. He noticed her uneasiness, so he held her hand comfortingly and planted a soft kiss on her collarbone. From her gentle collarbone to her delicate shoulders, he finally stopped at her chest. "Senior Marshall brother," she gasped. This time, she didn't respond. He took off his clothes in confusion and held her waist. Tinga clenched her teeth, but she didn't feel the pain she expected. She was a little confused, but she heard she chuckling. "Concentrate." She didn't have time to think because a huge wave had already submerged them. They didn't know how much time had passed, but the two of them gradually calmed down. She sighed and put on his robe. He helped her put her clothes back on first, and then fix his own clothes. When the two of them were neatly dressed, he hugged her again reluctantly. "I'm going in." Tinga raised her head and looked at him. "Rest assured, I'll always be here." Chapter 3:11. Inside the cultivation room, Tinga sat cross-legged. The spiritual aura in her dantian was abundant, including a lot of yang spiritual aura. After such a long period of cultivation, the yang spiritual aura had smoothly entered her dantian and merged with her yin spiritual aura, forming a cycle. After forming her gold core, her dantian expanded a lot, which gave space for yin and yang spiritual aura to converge. The yang spiritual aura she obtained from Qin, she allowed her art of the origin to be truly displayed, and her real origin appeared in her body. After completing a great circulatory cycle and returning the spiritual aura to her dantian, Tinga stood up and walked out of the cultivation room. Outside the room, the wind blew gently, the bamboo leaves rustled, and Feifei squeaked and pounced on her. Xiaohua went to cultivate again. In this virtual sky world, there were only two spiritual beasts. Feifei loved to play, so it waited for Tinga to come out. It was very happy. She smiled and played with Feifei for a while. In the end, she gave it several medicinal pills to appease it and let it play with butterflies by itself. It was strange. Although she let the two spiritual beasts eat the spiritual plants in the virtual sky world, they seemed to like medicinal pills more. Perhaps medicinal pills had a better taste? Thinking of this, Tinga couldn't help but smile. She felt a little bored, so she couldn't help but look back at the bamboo house next to her. This was Qin's cultivation room. It had been 3 years since he entered closed-door meditation to form his nascent soul. His cultivation room had always been quiet, with only the continuous circulation of spiritual aura. During this time, Tinga understood one thing. People weren't afraid of not being able to get something, but losing it after getting it. In the past, when she was alone and had no worries, she didn't feel anything when she entered closed-door meditation for 5 to 6 years, or even more than 10 years. However, after she got used to living with him, she always felt like she was worried about something when she suddenly lost him. Tinga just smiled when she realized this. She didn't feel annoyed at all. In the past, she always worried about what she would do if she got it and lost it later. So she worried about gains and losses. In fact, so what if she lost it? Cherishing the time she got it and slowly adapting to it after losing it. This was a truly free and easy state of mind. If she was afraid of losing it and didn't dare to get it, it would be too tangled and impossible to break through. It had been 3 years. She hadn't reached the middle stage of the core formation realm, but she wasn't far from the peak of the early stage. The benefits she obtained from dual cultivation weren't inferior to Qin Shi's. Before she formed her gold core, Qin Shi once healed her, so she obtained a portion of his yang spiritual aura and learned what the origin was. After their dual cultivation, yin and yang intersected, allowing her to obtain a lot of yang spiritual energy all at once. The art of the origin was truly activated. She had originally thought that after obtaining the Sunu art of origin, her cultivation speed was already extremely fast. Only after her body had truly formed origin did she realize that this was the true meaning of the art of origin. The 5 elements generated each other, and yin and yang intersected in an endless cycle. Only then did the primal chaos begin and life appear. If it was said that she originally needed to absorb yin's spiritual energy from the outside world to increase her cultivation, then now she could use the origin immemorial in her body to create spiritual energy. Of course, the speed at which she produced spiritual energy was not very fast. If she wanted to cultivate normally, she would still need to absorb spiritual energy from the outside world and turn it into her own. However, the ability to produce spiritual energy on her own was unheard of in the current cultivation world. When she absorbed spiritual energy, her body was also producing spiritual energy. This way, her cultivation would always be ahead of others. This was the most heaven-defying thing. But she didn't know whether Qin Shi would also be like this after obtaining her yin spiritual energy. Since his art of 3 primordial cycles also required 3 auras to circulate, the principle was similar to her art of the origin, so it should be similar. Thinking up to this point, she cast her gaze towards Qin Shi's cultivation room. Although Qin Shi hadn't come out yet, based on the spiritual aura movement in the virtual sky world, she knew that his closed-door meditation this time was very smooth. Maybe he could really advance to the nascent soul realm smoothly. It was just that she didn't know how long it would take him. The closed-door meditation time for nascent soul formation was generally longer than for core formation, but it was different for everyone. It could range from 2 to 10 years. Before Qin Shi entered closed-door meditation, his spiritual aura was overflowing, so it was reasonable to say that success would come naturally and wouldn't take too long. With this thought in mind, Tinga started to worry again. It's been 3 years, but he still hasn't come out of closed-door meditation. He hasn't even made any movements. Could it be that he encountered some kind of problem? Regardless of whether Qin Shi encountered a problem or not, she couldn't think of anything now. She absolutely couldn't disturb him during his soul formation. The only thing she could do was wait outside. At the very least, the spiritual aura inside the virtual sky world was peaceful, so he should be fine now. Tinga continued to live her days of concocting medicinal pills with her eyes open and cultivating with her eyes closed. Cultivating was timeless. In the blink of an eye, another 2 years had passed. One day, Tinga, who was cultivating, suddenly opened her eyes. The virtual sky world was connected to her mind. Just now, she sensed a sudden big change in the virtual sky world. She stood up, pushed the door open, and was immediately stunned. Inside the virtual sky world, the originally very rich spiritual aura condensed into dew-like spiritual beads. Their spiritual light illuminated the entire sky. Countless spiritual beads rushed towards Qin Shi's cultivation room, surrounding the bamboo house. The beads sparkled brightly, making the surroundings look as beautiful as a fairyland. Tinga recalled that when Martial Uncle Xianin formed his nascent soul, this kind of scene also appeared on Clear Spring Peak. She couldn't help but smile. In other words, Qin Shi was close to successfully forming his nascent soul. Next, as long as he stabilized his mind and got rid of his inner demon, he could advance to the nascent soul realm. Thinking up to this point, her heart was filled with joy. She secretly prayed that Qin Shi could pass the final test and successfully advance to the nascent soul realm. He had already failed 3 times and experienced enough setbacks. If he still didn't succeed, it would be too disheartening. Time passed day by day. The spiritual light didn't disperse for several months. During these months, Tinga also stayed outside the cultivation room without leaving for even a moment. At first, Qinshi's cultivation room only attracted those spiritual beads slowly. Later, the speed became faster and faster. Gradually, it turned into a huge whirlpool. Inside this whirlpool, countless spiritual beads rushed inside, and the spiritual aura pressure also became stronger and stronger. Tinga felt that she could barely stabilize her mind under this spiritual aura pressure only if she used the soul-refining art with all her strength. The stronger the spiritual aura pressure, the happier she felt. She had the soul-refining art. Even if she was in the peak stage of the core formation realm, he couldn't suppress her with spiritual aura pressure unless he was a nascent soul cultivator. This showed that she wasn't far from successfully forming his nascent soul. After an unknown amount of time, she gently opened his eyes in the cultivation room. A few short years were like a lifetime to him. This time, he finally succeeded in walking out of his inner demon. He smiled and looked down at his hands. He finally succeeded in forming his nascent soul. He stood up, spiritual aura swirling around his body like a flying spiritual bird. His body was full of power, the power to move mountains and drain seas. This was the feeling of forming his nascent soul. He closed his eyes, took a deep breath, then opened them again with a smile on his face. He gently pushed the door of the cultivation room open. Their eyes met. A few years of separation was like a lifetime to him. He greedily looked at the person in front of him, not letting go of the slightest subtle expression. He remembered that in the dream of his inner demon, he succeeded in forming his nascent soul. 100 years later, she also entered the nascent soul realm. The two of them held hands and cultivated the path of immortality together. Their names shook the celestial pole, and they entered the deification realm together. This time, he didn't immerse himself in it for long before he jumped out of it. As long as he opened his eyes, this was their real life. Why would they need an illusion? Tinga didn't speak, and neither did Qinshi. They just walked towards each other naturally and hugged each other quietly. Because of this nascent soul, they were almost separated from each other. Today, they finally got what they wanted. Tinga smiled slightly. She hadn't moved from this place for several months. Her voice was a little hoarse. Martial Uncle Shojing, congratulations on advancing to the nascent soul realm. Qinshi also smiled. He couldn't help but lower his head and bite her. Martial Uncle, and isn't that right? Tinga stood on her tiptoes and also bit him. She hugged him with her arms and teased, advancing to the nascent soul realm and becoming a Lord Taoist. From now on, you won't be counted in the sect. Martial Uncle Shojing, you can't run away from the title of an old cow eating cradle grass. Then you can't run away. She hugged her waist, lifted her up, and kissed her. Never white hair against red makeup. Never afraid of a pear blossom crushing a begonia. After an unknown amount of time, the breathless kiss finally confirmed each other's existence. She held Tinga in his arms and sat directly on the step she was sitting on before. How long have you been waiting outside? Not long. I don't remember. Don't remember? She lowered his head. You really don't remember, or you don't want to tell me? Tinga rolled her eyes and smiled. Since you know I don't want to tell you, why did you ask me? All right. She sighed. He knew he couldn't ask her if she didn't want to tell him, so he changed the topic. How long did it take me to form my nascent soul? 5 years. Tinga asked, did it go smoothly? She nodded happily. Very smoothly. There were almost no twists and turns. However, I spent a lot of time fusing with the Een spiritual aura, so it took me 5 years. It's good that it went smoothly. Chapter 312. Tinga was very confident that she could advance to the nascent soul realm within 100 years. With her aptitude, the virtual sky world, and now with Qinshi, she was very sure that she could advance to the nascent soul realm within 100 years as long as there were no accidents.
Of course, the matter of forming a nascent soul wasn't decided solely by talent. She understood this point, so during these 100 years, she definitely had to work hard in her cultivation. After she finished his chores, he asked Imo, Tinga, "Since I've successfully advanced to the nascent soul realm, why weren't there any celestial phenomena when I came out?" When she advanced to the nascent soul realm, almost all the spiritual aura in the virtual sky world turned into spiritual beads. But apart from that, there were no thunderstorms or spiritual objects condensed from spiritual aura, so it really didn't look like the advanced stage of the nascent soul realm. Imo Tinga already encountered this problem when she advanced to the nascent soul realm. She said, "The virtual sky world is a closed space, so how could there be celestial phenomena? When I advanced to the nascent soul realm, there weren't any celestial phenomena until I came out of the virtual sky world." "I see." She asked again, "How's the situation outside? Can we go out now?" Imo Tinga didn't answer. Instead, she cast a spell to open the sky of the virtual sky world. The sky was red, and the ground was black. Demonic Mountain seemed to be a different world compared to before they entered the virtual sky world. Fortunately, the lightning, thunder, and the falling rocks had all stopped. It was just stabilized a year ago, but there are still a lot of drifting restrictions, Imo Tinga said. In the past year, no restrictions have collapsed. That's good. She stared at the outside world and said, "In that case, we can prepare to go out." "Huh?" Imo Tinga was a little confused. "We're going out now? There's still a lot of restrictions outside." She smiled and glanced at her. "Have you forgotten? I've advanced to the nascent soul realm now, so these small restrictions are no longer a threat to me." Imo Tinga thought about it and smiled. "I haven't gotten used to it yet." Although Demonic Mountain was dangerous, for nascent soul cultivators, as long as they didn't go to dangerous places like the depths of a mortal's ruins, there wouldn't be any danger. Originally, the two of them were trapped here. If they wanted to get out, they had to solve a lot of things. Now that she had advanced to the nascent soul realm, those problems were no longer a problem, such as these restrictions and the way to get out. Back then, when she and Yihai were trapped on Demonic Mountain, it was Yihai who used all his spiritual aura to help she escape. Now that she had advanced to the nascent soul realm, he could rely on his own cultivation level to break the restrictions once he left Demonic Mountain. However, when they thought back to such peaceful days, both of them felt reluctant to part. Several days later, the two of them finished preparing everything and came out of the virtual sky world. As soon as she left the virtual sky world, she felt the fierce gales. She frowned. With a wave of his sleeve, a wisp of spiritual aura surged up, blocking the gales outside. Then he got on the flying cloud and headed towards a mortal's ruins together. Along the way, the two of them saw a lot of skeletons. Some of them even had Chinquin bags, magic weapons, and other things scattered around them. Imo Tinga didn't hesitate to put them all into her bag. She didn't find any strange things on this trip to Demonic Mountain, but her harvest wasn't small. 10 years ago, before they escaped into the virtual sky world, the two of them picked up a lot of things. Moreover, this time, many cultivators were involved in the restrictions and died here. Now that the restrictions were stable, these people's belongings became theirs again. Watching Imo Tinga happily picking up the scattered Chinquin bags, she couldn't help but find it funny. You have a unique treasure like the virtual sky world, and you usually have the support of the sect, so you don't lack spirit stones, do you? Why do you still like picking up things so much? Imo Tinga said confidently, "You've never lacked spirit stones, so of course you don't know the pain of lacking spirit stones. The things are right in front of me, so it'd be a waste not to pick them up." When she wandered around with Second Uncle, she wished she could split one spirit stone into two. This kind of pain of lacking spirit stones had always been engraved in her heart, so it was impossible for her to turn a blind eye to these Chinquin bags. As they walked and picked up things, the two of them slowly headed towards a mortal's ruins. After the previous earthquake, the scenery of Demonic Mountain changed completely, so it took them a long time to find the right way. Fortunately,
Tens of thousands of feet peak was split in two during the collapse of the restrictions, so they could directly fly over the remaining height without having to be as careful as when they came. When they arrived at tens of thousands of feet peak and returned to Immortal's ruins, Tinga asked, "Senior Marshal Brother, is there any danger in breaking the restrictions here?" They were trapped in the virtual sky world, and the entrance to Demonic Mountain had long been closed. If they wanted to go out, they could only go through the place she discovered. Back then, in order to break the restrictions, she used the secret technique of the art of 3 primordial cycles to temporarily raise his cultivation level to the nascent soul realm. After he went out, his vitality was greatly damaged, and his cultivation level directly fell back to the aura refining realm. It took him more than 10 years to recover his vitality. She knew what she was worried about, so he said with a smile, "Don't worry. The process of breaking the restrictions isn't dangerous. I'm a real nascent soul cultivator now, so I won't get hurt." Oh, Tinga was a little relieved. He had just advanced to the nascent soul realm and hadn't stabilized his realm yet. If he got hurt again, he wouldn't be the same as before he formed his nascent soul. "Let's go this way." After searching for a while, they finally found the right place. She pulled her and flew towards the restrictions. *****. It had been 10 years since the last time Demonic Mountain opened, but the turbulence it caused still hadn't subsided. Demonic Mountain had existed in the Celestial Pole for millions of years since ancient times. There were also records of exploration for more than 100,000 years. Countless people had died there, but there had never been so many deaths. More than 90 years ago, the last time Demonic Mountain opened, the Great Restrictions collapsed and many cultivators died inside. At that time, the whole Celestial Pole was in an uproar, calling it a disaster that hadn't happened in thousands of years. But no one expected that the next time Demonic Mountain opened, there would be even more deaths. Except for those who left in advance, all the aura refining and foundation building cultivators died on Demonic Mountain. None of them escaped. The core formation cultivators fared better, but only 20 to 30% of them escaped. Even half of the nascent soul cultivators died inside. Of course, the collapse of the restrictions wasn't the main reason why the nascent soul cultivators died. The reason why so many nascent soul cultivators died was because they fought fiercely in Jade Palace. It was just that ordinary cultivators, even ordinary disciples of big sects, didn't know this reason. Ordinary cultivators only knew that the last time Demonic Mountain opened, more than 30 nascent soul cultivators entered one after another, but less than 20 of them came out alive. Among them, there were more than 10 nascent soul cultivators who died, and 5 or 6 of them were from the 7 great cultivation groups. This number shocked the Celestial Pole. Even Tiandao sect, the number 1 cultivation group in the Celestial Pole, only had 7 nascent soul cultivators. In that case, it was equivalent to each of the 7 great cultivation groups losing 1 nascent soul cultivator. Among the 7 great cultivation groups, it took several hundred years for each of them to produce a nascent soul cultivator. This kind of loss was more serious than any demonic beast. In the past 10 years, almost all the cultivators in the Celestial Pole side with emotion. 70 years ago, they experienced a rarely seen demonic beast riot, and now they also experienced 2 riots on Demonic Mountain. The cultivation level of the Celestial Pole would most likely take several hundred years to recover. If it was in the past, with this kind of cultivation, he wouldn't even need to think about participating in the Tiandao sect's Immortals Assembly. He could only try his luck at a small cultivation sect. It just so happened that they came at a good time. In the past 10 years, Tiandao sect held an Immortals Assembly almost every year, and many disciples in the 7th layer of the aura refining realm were able to join the sect. The man called Wu Lao San turned his head and looked at the lean man who called him. He curled his lips and said, "If you, Li Xiang, can come, why can't I, Wu Sandy, come?" This situation was not uncommon in the Immortals Assembly in recent years. Originally, if the Immortals Assembly was held every 3 or 10 years, a large number of young cultivators from all over the world would gather at that time. Most of them didn't know each other. However, since it was held every year, the number of cultivators participating in the Immortals Assembly was limited. Naturally, there would be a lot of acquaintances. The Li man named Li Xiong grinned when he heard Wu Sandy's words. He put his hand on Wu Sandy's shoulder and said, "Wu Lao-san, we've known each other since childhood. I'm just saying hello. I don't mean anything else. Don't misunderstand." Misunderstand? Oomph. Wu Sandy cast a glance at Li Xiong and said disdainfully, "Forget it. If Li Xiong's words can be trusted, the sun will rise from the west." Hey, what do you mean by that? Li Xiong patted his shoulder hard. "Let's forget about the past. We're old acquaintances. It must be fate that brought us together to meet in this Immortals Assembly. Come. Let's have a chat. Who knows, we might even be able to give each other some advice." Wu Sandy looked at him suspiciously for a while, but he was eventually persuaded. Right, they were all here to participate in the Immortals Assembly. Although they had conflicts since childhood, they didn't hate each other. It would be good to have a chat. Thereupon, the two of them found a corner and began to talk about the Immortals Assembly. They talked about cultivation and exchanged information. They were both in the 7th layer of the aura refining realm. In the past, they really wouldn't have had the chance to enter a big sect like Tiandao sect. They couldn't let go of such an opportunity. Who knew when Tiandao sect would receive enough disciples? And it wouldn't be as easy to enter as it was now. After they finished talking about what they heard, Li Xiong still wanted to continue. He asked, "Wu Lao-san, all 7 great cultivation groups are recruiting disciples. Why did you also come to Tiandao sect?" Wu Sandy stroked his mustache and snorted. "What other reason could there be? It's close. Besides, Tiandao sect is known as the #1 cultivation group, so it's better than other cultivation groups." No. Li Xiong shook his hand and said, "Wu Lao-san, you're wrong." "Wrong?" Wu Sandy glared at him. "What's wrong? Among the 7 great cultivation groups, there's no need to mention Danding School. It suffered heavy losses 70 years ago, so it's only a medium-sized cultivation group now. Lingshou sect specializes in beast-taming techniques, so ordinary cultivators like us who don't have talent in beast-taming would find it hard to enter. As for Zhengfa sect, it specializes in water techniques, but we don't have water spiritual roots. As for Biyun sect, I'm not a female cultivator, so their requirements for male cultivators are much higher. Gujian sect isn't bad, but it's a sword cultivation group, so it won't be easy for them to cultivate again. In this case, the remaining ones are Xianqing School and Tiandao sect. Although Xianqing School isn't bad, it's still a bit inferior to Tiandao sect. Wrong. Li Xiong made 3 mistakes in a row and interrupted Wu Sandy. He squinted at him and said, "When it comes to cultivation, I, Li Xiong, may not be as good as you, but when it comes to these things, you can't see them as clearly as I can." Although Wu Sandy wasn't convinced, Li Xiong admitted that his cultivation wasn't as good as his, which made him feel very comfortable, so he didn't care about such a trivial matter as being interrupted. But he still felt he was right. "What's wrong? Why don't you tell me?" "In fact, what you said before was correct. Danding School and Lingshou sect are either too weak or they're not suitable for us. But you said Xianqing School is a bit weaker than Tiandao sect, so you're wrong." "Why?" Wu Sandy glared at him and said, "Xianqing School has always been a bit weaker than Tiandao sect. Although Tiandao sect lost 1 nascent soul cultivator 10 years ago, they still have 6, and 2 of them are in the late stage of the nascent soul realm. Xianqing School only has 1 late-stage nascent soul cultivator. Although no nascent soul cultivator died 10 years ago, and there are still 5 of them now, 1 late-stage nascent soul cultivator is equivalent to several early-stage nascent soul cultivators. This strength is obvious at a glance." You've only seen a little bit on the surface," Li Xiong said proudly. "Yes, the strength of nascent soul cultivators in Tiandao sect is indeed a bit stronger than that of Xianqing School, but have you thought about what will happen in the next several hundred years?" Wu Sandy looked at him suspiciously. "What? Do you want to say that many Xianqing School cultivators will advance to the nascent soul realm?" But Tiandao sect also has many talented disciples. How can it be worse than Xianxing school? It's not bad. This was Tiandao sect, after all. Li Xiang's loud discussion seemed to indicate that Tiandao sect was inferior to Xianxing school, which had long attracted other people's attention. Those who came to participate in Tiandao sect's Immortals assembly all had a good impression of Tiandao sect, so their gazes were already filled with hostility when they heard Li Xiang's words. Li Xiang was a slippery person, so he naturally noticed this. He said unhurriedly, "When did I say Tiandao sect was inferior to Xianxing school? What I said was, it's still too early for you to think Xianxing school lost to Tiandao sect. Yes, Tiandao sect is a bit stronger in terms of nascent soul cultivators, but the development of a sect doesn't only rely on nascent soul cultivators, but also on thousands of low-level disciples." The people around them were all low-level, aura-refining cultivators who wanted to enter the sect. Hearing this made them feel comfortable and less hostile towards Li Xiang. Li Xiang continued, "Have you ever thought about how many low-level disciples Tiandao sect lost during the demonic beast riot and the 2 disasters on Demonic Mountain? The number of disciples in the aura-refining and foundation-building realms was at least 1,000. Also, there were 7 or 8 core formation cultivators. So this is why Tiandao sect is stronger than Xianxing school. It has thousands more aura-refining disciples, 100 more foundation-building disciples, and almost 10 more core formation cultivators. It's because it has more low-level disciples that it has more potential. Tiandao sect always has 1 or 2 more nascent soul cultivators than Xianxing school." These words attracted the attention of the low-level cultivators around them. Many people gathered around them, and those who didn't also pricked up their ears to listen. Li Xiang became even more proud and said loudly, "But do you know that Xianxing school didn't lose any aura-refining disciples during the demonic beast riot? Also, during the 2 disasters on Demonic Mountain, few low-level disciples participated because it was too far away from Demonic Mountain. In this way, Xianxing school's number of aura-refining disciples to core formation cultivators isn't worse than Tiandao sect at all, maybe even a bit more." At this point, someone interjected, "Fellow Taoist, how do you know about these things? You're not a sect disciple, so how do you know the number of disciples in a big sect?" "Hey!" Li Xiang glanced at the cultivator who raised the question, raised his head, and said, "Brother, you don't care about these things, so of course you don't know. No matter how big a sect is, it doesn't have more than 10,000 people. Small cultivators like us can't know the exact number of cultivators, but we can estimate it." Someone in the crowd said, "Yes, fellow Taoist is right. This isn't a top secret. We can estimate the number of disciples these big sects accept every year." "Yes, yes," someone echoed. Li Xiang was extremely happy and said, "Fellow Taoist is right. We estimate it from a number of disciples they accept." "Enough, enough." Someone couldn't bear his proud manner and said, "If you have something to say, just say it. What's the point of talking about this?" Although the words weren't polite, they were waiting to hear it, so Li Xiang didn't get angry. He continued to say, "Okay, let's continue talking about business. In terms of a number of low-level disciples, Xianxing school isn't worse than Tiandao sect. So, in terms of potential, it can also be said to be equal. But there's one more thing. I don't know if you've noticed, but Xianxing school has suffered very little or no losses in these events. This is very important for a disciple's cultivation mentality. With this in mind, I'm afraid the potential of Xianxing school's low-level disciples will surpass that of Tiandao sect." Li Xiang looked around and saw that all the cultivators were silent and didn't object to his opinion. So he continued to say, "Then what's Xianxing school's disadvantage now? Even its nascent soul cultivators are still suppressed by Tiandao sect. Most of Tiandao sect's nascent soul cultivators are facing death, while Xianxing school's strength isn't as good as Tiandao sect's. But most of their lifespans haven't passed the halfway mark. Considering this, I don't think I need to say whose future is better, right?" I dare say that in the next 100 years, if Xianxing School is the first to produce a nascent soul cultivator, their momentum will flourish, and the title of the #1 sect in the celestial pole will be theirs. The crowd was silent. After a while, someone said sarcastically, "Since that's the case, why doesn't this fellow Taoist go to Xianxing School? He even came to participate in Tiandao Sect's Immortals Assembly." That person was obviously a supporter of Tiandao Sect. Li Xiang didn't get angry. He smiled and said, "Brother, you haven't been to Xianxing School, right? I'm telling you, Xianxing School didn't lose many low-level disciples. They've recovered their strength in recent years. Although they've also opened their gates in the past few years, they've been recruiting disciples just as strictly. Li Xiang, I'm a little clever, but when it comes to cultivation, I'm not worth mentioning. I really don't have the confidence." That person sneered again. "Are you so sure that Xianxing School will produce a nascent soul cultivator first? Maybe it'll be Tiandao Sect. At that time, they'll still have more nascent soul cultivators than Xianxing School, and they'll also be stronger than them. They won't be able to snatch the #1 sect in the celestial pole no matter what." "I didn't say Xianxing School would be the first," Li Xiang said innocently. "I'm just analyzing what might happen. I've always said it might happen. Everyone heard it, right?" The onlookers nodded. What he said was indeed possible. But although it was only a possibility, Li Xiang's analysis was very reasonable. Among the onlookers, some people who were quite confident in their cultivation level thought that if Xianxing School really didn't lower their conditions for recruiting disciples, it meant that they were very confident. Should they go to Xianxing School to try it out first? Seeing that the onlookers all agreed with Li Xiang, the person was annoyed and said angrily, "Just wait. Tiandao Sect will definitely produce a nascent soul cultivator first. At that time, Xianxing School will still be the second." Li Xiang smiled and said, "Brother, this kind of thing is really hard to say. It might be Tiandao Sect or Xianxing School. But in the end, it's their big sect's business. We little cultivators can just chat when we have nothing to do. After all, we haven't even entered a sect yet." Yes, yes. In front of outsiders, Wu Sandy also stood on Li Xiang's side. "We're just chatting. Fellow Taoist, you don't need to be excited. You don't need to be excited." At this point, a sudden clap of thunder was heard. The skies suddenly flashed with dazzling golden light. The wind and clouds surged, and the thunder rumbled endlessly. All the cultivators looked up and saw countless spiritual lights flashing in the sky. Among them, spiritual birds were flying and auspicious clouds were surging. A strong spiritual aura pressure shrouded them. The spiritual aura of the little cultivators suddenly became chaotic, making it hard for them to breathe. Some people with weaker cultivation levels even vomited blood and knelt down. The crowd began to stir. Someone shouted, "What's wrong? What's that?" Then a knowledgeable person shouted, "Celestial phenomenon. It's celestial phenomenon." Someone formed his nascent soul. The cultivators who heard Li Xiang's discussion were secretly surprised. Someone from Tiandao Sect formed his nascent soul again. It seemed Xianxing School really couldn't become the #1 sect. Li Xiang and Wu Sandy glanced at each other with bitterness in their eyes. It couldn't be such a coincidence, right? Then didn't they work for nothing? But this was indeed the celestial phenomenon of nascent soul formation. In the sky, the golden light became more and more dazzling and gradually dyed the auspicious clouds red like fire. The auspicious clouds surged and slowly formed a shape. A pair of wings spread, tail feathers raised, and a clear cry. A divine beast phoenix. Chapter 314. Before Taoist Master Yanglin could finish sighing, he saw the celestial phenomena of nascent soul formation all over the sky, and he was so shocked that his jaw almost dropped. Just as he was wondering why no one in the sect was doing closed-door meditation to form his nascent soul, he received a summon from the head Grand Supreme Elder. He had no choice but to hurriedly order his disciples to inquire about it, and then he went to see the head Grand Supreme Elder first. "Greetings, Supreme Elders. As soon as he entered the abode of the head Grand Supreme Elder, Lu Dingyuan, he was stared at by 4 nascent soul elders, causing Taoist Master Yanglin to tremble with fear. There were 4 nascent soul elders, and one of them was a late-stage nascent soul cultivator. Even if they didn't deliberately release their spiritual aura, a middle-stage core formation cultivator like him would find it hard to remain calm and collected. The Tiandao sect originally had 7 nascent soul elders. One of them died 10 years ago during the extraterrestrial demon war, and another was seriously injured and was now in seclusion. Of the remaining 5, only one wasn't present. It seemed that the appearance of the nascent soul celestial phenomenon had shocked the higher-ups of the Tiandao sect. "Dispense with the formalities," said Grand Elder Lu Dingyuan, who sat in the seat of honor. He looked young, no more than 30 years old. He had a 3-inch beard and wore a Taoist crown and a Taoist robe. He looked like an immortal. But these were just appearances. Perfected Master Yanglin knew that this head supreme elder actually cultivated in devil arts. He was kind when he was in a good mood, but if he was in a bad mood, he would be very irritable. Therefore, although Master Taoist Yanglin said that there was no need for formalities, he still bowed respectfully and asked, "May I know what instructions Grand Supreme Elders have for me? Do I still need to instruct you?" Among the 4 nascent soul elders, Fairy Fengqing, the one with the most fiery temper, spoke up. She glanced outside, her phoenix eyes slanting. Such a big movement. As the sect leader, you shouldn't be unaware, right? Of course, Immortal Yanglin knew the reason, but he just asked out of politeness. He didn't expect to get it wrong again, so he could only answer with a bitter face, "I don't know either." There are a total of 5 senior martial brothers and sisters in the late stage of core formation in our sect. 2 of them are close to the peak stage of core formation, but these 2 senior martial brothers haven't said anything about forming their nascent souls. Disciple was just thinking about who is forming their nascent souls, so only had time to send someone to inquire. Hearing those words, the 4 nascent soul realm elders looked at each other. Of course, they knew about these things. It was just that there were some things that the sect leader knew more about, so they summoned him to ask. Grand Supreme Elders, Taoist Yanglin mustered up his courage and said, "Disciple discovered that the celestial phenomenon appeared in the North Peak. The North Peak is connected to Demonic Mountain, and there's no Immortal's Cave there at all. So Disciple boldly guessed that the celestial phenomenon isn't from our sect, or there's some secret behind it." After all, he was the sect leader. His words were quite insightful. Hearing this, the 4 nascent soul elders looked at Lu Dingyuan, the late nascent soul cultivator. Stroking his beard, Lu Dingyuan replied, "That's possible. Everyone knows the situation of the core formation cultivators in our sect. It's not a good time for them to form their nascent soul. Yet the celestial phenomenon appeared in the North Mountain. In my opinion, it's most likely not a cultivator from our sect." Senior Martial Brother Lu, Fairy Fengqing said with a frown, "Who dares to form their nascent soul on the territory of my Tiandao sect?" He was too daring. No matter what, with a number 1 sect in the celestial pole. There's so many nascent soul cultivators in our sect, and we also have Senior Martial Brother Lu and Senior Martial Brother Bian. How dare he? Lu Dingyuan shook his head. "We'll know what's going on soon. There's no need to be anxious." After a long period of silence, the astronomical phenomenon still hadn't disappeared. The spiritual energy in the sky was even becoming more and more abundant. Dazzling golden light danced in the air. Suddenly, Fairy Fengqing exclaimed and stood up abruptly in surprise. "Senior brothers, look!" The other 3 nascent soul realm cultivators looked up at the same time and saw the auspicious clouds on the horizon forming the shape of a phoenix. Then he heard a clear cry, like the cry of a phoenix. Phoenix celestial phenomenon. Lu Dingyuan also couldn't sit still. When cultivators formed their nascent souls, celestial phenomena would appear, and the auspicious clouds inside the celestial phenomena would take the shape of various spiritual beasts. When he formed his nascent soul, what appeared was a bishi, and at that time, it already shook East Kunwu. Swan and I was one of the 9 sons of the dragon, the descendant of a divine beast. Sure enough, he successfully cultivated to the late stage of nascent soul. The phoenix celestial phenomenon actually appeared on this young man. What did this mean? The phoenix was a true divine beast. Lu Dingyuan made a prompt decision and immediately sent out a teleportation talisman. After a while, the teleportation talisman returned. After he put it away, his expression suddenly changed. Senior Marshal Brother Lu? Fairy Feng Qing asked. After a while, Lu Dingyuan's expression slowly calmed down. He stood up and said, "Your senior martial brother Bian already knows what's going on, so he's on his way." He glanced at his 3 junior martial brothers and sisters, who were all only in the early stage of the nascent soul realm. He sighed and said, "It's Xianqing School's Qin Shoujing. He's forming his nascent soul on Demonic Mountain and just broke the restriction." What? The 3 nascent soul cultivators were still confused, but Master Taoist Yanglin's expression changed first. After all, there was a difference in realm. No matter how talented a core formation cultivator was, nascent soul cultivators wouldn't pay much attention to him. Therefore, the 3 nascent soul elders weren't too familiar with Qin Shoujing's name, but Master Taoist Yanglin was very clear about it. Upon seeing the 3 nascent soul elders' questioning gazes, Master Taoist Yanglin calmed down and explained, "Martial uncles, you probably don't know, but Qin Shoujing is the disciple of Lord Taoist Jinghe of Xianqing School. He's known as a genius. He formed his Gold Core 78 at that time and shook the celestial pole." "Oh, so it's him." One of the nascent soul cultivators said, "Senior Martial Brother Lu said a few years ago that our core formation disciples were a bit worse than Xianqing Schools. Qin Shoujing was one of them, right?" Lu Dingyuan frowned and said in a deep voice, "You don't know much, so you don't know. A few years ago, I heard he tried to form his nascent soul, so I kept this matter in mind. He failed to form his nascent soul 3 times in the past, so he came to Demonic Mountain. Later, he disappeared without a trace on Demonic Mountain. I even thought he'd already perished inside, but I didn't expect he actually came out alive and even formed his nascent soul." Master Taoist Yanglin reported, "Martial Uncle Lu, more than 90 years ago, Qin Shoujing also went to Demonic Mountain and came out more than 10 years after the restriction was closed. Presumably, he knew some secrets on Demonic Mountain, so he could escape every time." "I see." Lu Dingyuan pondered for a moment, then shook his head and sighed. "It's really fate. I originally thought heaven blessed Tiandao sect and let Qin Shoujing die on Demonic Mountain. I didn't expect that in the end, we still lost to Xianqing School. Alas." Fairy Fengqing's expression turned fierce. She said, "Senior Martial Brother Lu, since he just happened to appear in Tiandao's sect, why don't we just kill him on the spot?" Lu Dingyuan shook his head. "Junior Martial Sister Fengqing, sometimes killing people can't solve problems. Qin Jinghe must have Qin Shoujing's natal lamp. How could Qin Jinghe not know he's alive? Besides, Qin Shoujing's appearance was so big that the news couldn't be hidden. If he died in Tiandao's sect, how could Xianqing School let us go? Now is the time for Tiandao's sect to recuperate, not to fight. Even if the title of the #1 sect in the Celestial Pole is taken away, we can still get it back, but we can't afford to lose our disciples." What Senior Martial Brother Lu said makes sense. An early-stage nascent soul cultivator said. An early-stage nascent soul cultivator said, "We have Senior Martial Brother Lu and Senior Martial Brother Bian, so Tiandao sect's power is still there. We don't need to be impatient." Fairy Fengqing wanted to say something, but Lu Dingyuan raised his hand and stopped her. "They're here." At that moment, the celestial phenomenon gradually ended. Several flight lights flew over from the north peak of Mount Yuheng and stopped in front of Lu Dingyuan's Immortal's Cave. They were Lord Taoist Bian, another late-stage nascent soul cultivator from Tiandao sect, Qin Shi, and Mo Tiange. In an instant, a smile appeared on Lu Dingyuan's face. He led his 3 nascent soul martial siblings and a group of disciples to welcome them. "So it's fellow Taoist Shoujing, Brother Taoist Jinghe's beloved disciple. It's an honor to meet you. In any case, Qin had just advanced to the nascent soul realm. A late-stage nascent soul cultivator treating him with such courtesy could be considered giving him enough face. So he also politely returned the salute with Mo Tinga. I don't dare. Greetings, senior martial brothers and sisters of Tiandao sect. I had no choice but to form my nascent soul on Demonic Mountain. If I disturbed you, please forgive me. Haha, you're too kind. Lu Dingyuan felt a bit more comfortable when he heard she calling himself a brat, but actually calling himself a junior humbly. He said, "This is also a fated chance. Fellow Taoist Shojing, please come in and have a seat." She smiled, gave Mo Tinga a meaningful look, and followed Lu Dingyuan into his immortal's cave. Mo Tinga understood what he meant. Since Tiandao's sect was treating them with courtesy, there shouldn't be any danger, so they could go in boldly without worry. After they entered Lu Dingyuan's immortal's cave, Lu Dingyuan introduced the nascent soul cultivators present to Qin one by one. After greeting them, he saw Mo Tinga following behind Qin. So he asked, "This is?" Qin smiled and said, "This is my junior martial sister and also my Dao companion. Her Taoist name is Qingwei." Oh, Lu Dingyuan was a bit surprised. Although most nascent soul male cultivators took core formation female cultivators as their Dao companions, Mo Tinga's cultivation level was indeed a bit low. But in the end, this was other people's business, so Lu Dingyuan just smiled and didn't say much. He just glanced at his disciples and told them to treat Mo Tinga with the same courtesy. Everyone sat down and served tea. Lu Dingyuan said, "Fellow Taoist Shojing, not only did you escape from death this time, but you also formed your nascent soul. You must have a lot of stories, right? Can you tell us?" Qin smiled. "I was just lucky. 10 years ago, when the restrictions on Demonic Mountain collapsed, my junior martial sister and I happened to not be affected, but we were trapped inside and couldn't get out. During these 10 years, Demonic Mountain was extremely unstable, so we had to find a safe place to do closed-door meditation. Fortunately, I obtained some treasures inside and successfully formed my nascent soul, which allowed me to escape." Really? When the restrictions on Demonic Mountain collapsed, only a few people escaped. Fellow Taoist Shojing was really lucky. Lu Dingyuan obviously didn't believe him, and Qin also didn't intend to make him believe him. This kind of thing was tacit. Therefore, he just smiled and asked, "Senior Martial Brother Lu, we've been trapped in Demonic Mountain all these years. May I know the situation in Kunwa now? How many people escaped? Is my master, Lord Taoist Jinghe, doing well?" Fellow Taoist Shojing, rest assured. Lu Dingyuan answered with a smile. Fellow Taoist Jinghe was really lucky. He escaped with fellow Taoist Huayan from your group, and he only suffered minor injuries. On the other hand, I heard fellow Taoist Huayan was seriously injured. I don't know how he's been these years. Oh, thank you for telling me, Senior Martial Brother Lu. Upon hearing this news, both Qin and Mo Tinga breathed sighs of relief. At least they were still alive. Chapter 315. They only stayed in Tiandao sect for one day. On the second day, Mo Tinga and Qin went back to Xianqing School. What they found interesting was that Xianqing School sent 2 disciples to Tiandao sect's Immortals Assembly to fan the flames, trying to persuade some cultivators with good aptitudes to go to Xianqing School. Coincidentally, when they talked about which of Tiandao's sect or Xianqing School would have a nascent soul cultivator, they broke the restriction on Demonic Mountain and triggered the nascent soul celestial phenomenon, making the 2 disciples think that Tiandao sect just happened to have a nascent soul cultivator and fell short of success. Soon, the truth spread like wildfire. After learning that it was Xianqing School cultivators who triggered the nascent soul celestial phenomenon, a group of cultivators withdrew from Tiandao sect's Immortals Assembly and wanted to go to Xianqing School to try their luck. The 2 disciples were overjoyed and soon contacted them. Since they were Xianqing School disciples and had a heavy responsibility, they didn't refuse and took the 2 foundation building disciples with them. If they flew back to Xianxin school on their own, it would probably take them several months. The appearance of a nascent soul, celestial phenomenon, saved them a lot of time and effort, and they directly completed their task. The two disciples were extremely grateful to Qin Shi, and they were also very curious about Mo Tiange. Qin Shi had a cold personality and was now a nascent soul cultivator, so the two disciples didn't dare to ask too many questions. Seeing that Mo Tiange was quite kind, they surrounded her and asked all sorts of questions, calling her martial uncle very affectionately. After being trapped on Demonic Mountain for 10 years, Mo Tiange also wanted to inquire about the outside world, so she chatted with the two foundation-building disciples along the way. Martial Uncle Qingwei, I heard you formed your gold core before you were 100 years old. You're really amazing. We've heard about you before, but we never had the chance to meet you. Now that we can meet you, we're really lucky. The foundation-building disciple, named Li Yang's mouth, seemed to be smeared with honey, and he could flatter her easily. Of course, Mo Tiange didn't take his words seriously. She just thought it was quite interesting, so she said with a smile, Are you too specialized in carrying out a glib talk mission? He's very eloquent. Another disciple, named Wu De, felt a bit ashamed when he heard that. He said, Martial Uncle Qingwei, please don't mind him. We often go to other cultivation groups to spread some news. This brat is used to it, so compliments come out of his mouth easily. He didn't mean to offend you. As he said that, he glared at Li Yang. Martial Uncle is one of us, so don't talk like that. Li Yang rubbed his head and revealed an embarrassed smile. Martial Uncle Qingwei. Although disciples' words are compliments, they're all true. You and Martial Uncle Shou Jing. Oh no, Martial Ancestor Shou Jing are legends in the sect. We've been looking forward to meeting you for a long time, but unfortunately, you two are elusive. It's difficult to meet you even if we wanted to. That was the truth. There was no need to mention Qin Shi. He rarely appeared in front of people. Even among the disciples who had been in the school for several decades, very few people had seen him. Mo Tiange also rarely went out. Aside from the time she took care of secular affairs for Lord Taoist Jinghe more than 60 years ago, she often went back and forth between peaks to handle affairs. In the past few decades, she was either traveling outside or cultivating in closed-door meditation. Mo Tiange smiled and changed the topic. You two work for the Steward's Hall, so you must be well informed. May I know how our sect has been in the past 10 years? Our sect's situation? Wu De thought for a moment, then answered, Martial Uncle, do you want to ask about our current strength and reputation? It's very good. Speaking of which, it's fortunate that we're far away from Demonic Mountain in western Kunwu. Every time Demonic Mountain opens, although several core formation martial uncles and nascent soul grandmasters go there, disciples below the foundation building realm rarely participate, so our losses aren't great. 10 years ago, when Demonic Mountain's Great Restriction collapsed, we only lost 2 core formation martial uncles and several foundation building cultivators, which is much better than other cultivation groups. Oh, Mo Tiange had already learned from Tiandao sect that her master and martial uncle Huayan were fine, but she still asked again, Are the 2 nascent soul grandmasters okay? Li Yang answered first, Don't worry, martial uncle. The 2 nascent soul grandmasters escaped in time, but they were both slightly injured. Mo Tiange and Qin Shi were mentally prepared for this, so they didn't take it seriously and just asked, Are they okay now? Unexpectedly, Li Yang asked, Martial uncle, did the people of Tiandao sect tell you that Grandmaster Jinghe was slightly injured and Grandmaster Huayan was seriously injured? Yes. Mo Tiange raised her eyebrows and looked at Qin Shi. From what he said, could it be that the information was inaccurate? Wu De sighed and said, Martial Uncle Qingwei, Grandmaster Shoujing, those words were actually released for others to hear, but the truth isn't like that. Grandmaster Huayan's injuries weren't that serious. Not only was his life not in danger, but he also didn't lose his cultivation level. I reckon he's recovered after 10 years of healing. Mo Tiange raised her eyebrows and asked, What about Grandmaster Jinghe? Is he okay? Sure enough, Wu De continued to say, Grandmaster Jinghe's situation isn't good. In fact, Grandmaster Jinghe tried his best to escape from Demonic Mountain with Grandmaster Huayan. Before we left, we heard that Grandmaster Jinghe was still in closed-door meditation to heal his injuries. I don't know how he's doing. Tinga and Qin, she exchanged a look and frowned, lost in thought. It turned out that the one who was seriously injured was their master, and the information circulating outside was false. This wasn't difficult to understand. Although Xianxing School had 6 nascent soul cultivators, there was only one in the late stage and one in the middle stage. Lord Daoist Jinghe's cultivation level was in the peak of the middle stage of the nascent soul realm, and his fighting strength wasn't inferior to that of a cultivator in the late stage. Needless to say, the existence of such a Lord Daoist meant to Xianxing School. With the loss of Tian Dao sect strength and Xianxing School possibly becoming the #1 sect in the Celestial Pole, this news was naturally concealed. Thinking up to this point, the two of them couldn't help but worry. Master was in the peak of the middle stage of the nascent soul realm now, but he was seriously injured. Would he be unable to advance to the late stage of the nascent soul realm because of this? Wuda and Li Yong were observing their expressions. Upon seeing the worried expressions on their faces, they immediately said, "Martial Uncle and Grandmaster don't need to worry too much. Although we can be considered core disciples of our school, we're only 2 small foundation-building cultivators. If Grandmaster Jinghe's life is really in danger, it'll be top-secret information, and he won't let us know about it." That's right. Clear Spring Peak has been prosperous these years. I heard Grandmaster Jinghe occasionally receives disciples, so it's obviously nothing serious. After thinking for a while, she nodded and finally said, "What you said is reasonable." Wuda and Li Yong were overjoyed to be praised by a nascent soul grandmaster, so they complimented Qin again. Tinga was worried, but also felt it was funny. Putting aside the matter about Lord Daoist Jinghe for the time being, Tinga asked, "Since you know so much about the school, do you know a foundation-building disciple named Yizhenji?" "Yizhenji?" Li Yong asked. "Martial Uncle, are you talking about Grandmaster Shoujing's inner disciple, your nephew?" Tinga didn't expect Li Yong would remember him as soon as she said his name. She was pleasantly surprised. "Do you really know him?" Li Yong shook his head. "Senior Martial Brother Yi is an elite disciple among elite disciples. We're just deacons of a steward's hall, and we often run errands outside. How could we know him? We've only seen him before." "Oh, then do you know his situation? Did he come back from his experiential learning?" Wuda took over the conversation and said with a smile, "Speaking of this, it's also interesting." Tinga was stunned. "What happened?" Li Yong rushed to say, "Senior Martial Brother Yi disappeared for more than 10 years, and there was no news about him. Unexpectedly, one year, news suddenly came from Kuanzhong City that an individual cultivator named Wanderer Baiyu was killed by 2 foundation-building cultivators. After that, our branch in Kuanzhong City received news from Senior Martial Brother Yi. Wanderer Baiyu?" Tinga and Qin, she exchanged glances. Both of them had astonishment in their eyes. Seeing that Tinga was confused, Qin, she said, "Wanderer Baiyu is also a member of the Individual Cultivators Alliance in Kuanzhong City. He's more than 400 years old and has a youthful appearance. Reportedly, he specializes in dual cultivation. I once guessed that the person Old Tong said he wanted you to exchange heavenly aromatic beans for chalcedony was Wanderer Baiyu." "Correct." Li Yong continued, "Grandmaster Shoujing is really experienced and knowledgeable. Wanderer Baiyu is an individual cultivator in the core formation realm from Kuanzhong City. According to the senior martial brothers I met, he's obviously an old man, but he looks like a youngster. Moreover, he's fastidious like a woman. His reputation isn't very good. Many people say he uses the plucking technique to maintain his youth." Tinga nodded. "What happened to Junji in the end?" Wuda continued. "Speaking of which, Senior Martial Brother Yi was really unlucky. When he traveled to Kuanzhong City, he accidentally saved a woman. As it turned out, that woman was the human furnace that Wanderer Baiyu fancied, so he captured her as well. Fortunately, due to Senior Martial Brother Ye's identity, Wanderer Baiyu didn't dare to kill him. In order to protect that woman, The two of them were imprisoned by Wanderer Baiyu for more than 10 years. After listening to the whole story, Emo Tiange was shocked at first. Then she became furious. This Wanderer Baiyu, how dare he? He actually dared to imprison a disciple of Xianxing school. Who said he didn't? Later on, I don't know what method senior martial brother you used, but he actually killed Wanderer Baiyu, a realm above him, and only then did he escape. Liang shook his head and said, according to the senior martial brothers in Kuanzhong City's branch, when senior martial brother Yi and that woman escaped, both of them were tortured beyond recognition. What happened next? Qin Shi frowned and asked, Wanderer Baiyu imprisoned a disciple of Xianxing school. Did the school deal with him? Of course. Knowing this Grandmaster Shoujing only had one inner disciple, Liang hastily said, as soon as senior martial brother Yi returned to Mount Taikong, the whole school was shocked. Grandmaster Jinghe personally gave the order and almost massacred the individual cultivators' alliance in Kuanzhong City. At that time, this matter shook Kunwu, and the individual cultivators' alliance was exterminated overnight. Later, Grandmaster Jinghe calmed down and agreed to let the irrelevant people go. Now, the individual cultivators' alliance in Kuanzhong City has already been reorganized. Emo, Tiange, and Qin, she finally felt their anger dissipate. If Wanderer Baiyu was still alive, the two of them would have immediately killed their way to Kuanzhong City. Jinji was their only disciple, but he was almost tortured to death by someone else. Just thinking about it made Emo Tiange and Qin Shi furious. Since Wanderer Baiyu cultivated the art of plucking and was a member of the individual cultivators' alliance, he was most likely the old friend Tong Tianyin mentioned. Shi and Tong Tianyin made an agreement to obtain heavenly aromatic beans from Demonic Mountain in exchange for 1,000-year-old chalcedony. If she met Wanderer Baiyu before that, Jinji probably wouldn't have suffered so much. Fortunately, Jinji escaped. Otherwise, she really would have regretted it for the rest of her life. Chapter 316. Worried about the two foundation-building disciples, Qin Shi and Emo Tiange spent 7 days to reach Xianxing School. As soon as they approached Mount Taikong, Emo Tiange saw several nascent Soul Lord Taoists and dozens of core formation masters in the air from a distance. She looked at Qin Shi suspiciously. What's going on? Qin Shi didn't understand what was going on either, but Wu De and Liang answered with a smile. Of course, to welcome Grandmaster Shoujing. Huh? Both of them were stunned. Several nascent Soul Lord Taoists and dozens of core formation cultivators actually came to welcome a nascent soul cultivator. The leader was even the head Grand Supreme Elder, Lord Taoist Xinyang. This was too grand. Even when Master returned to the mountain, he didn't have this kind of extravagance. While they were in a daze, Lord Taoist Xinyang led a huge crowd to welcome them and greeted them with a smile from afar. Shoujing, you're back. Qin Shi regained his composure and respectfully saluted Lord Taoist Xinyang. Martial Uncle Xinyang. Then he saluted the several nascent Soul Lord Taoists. Martial Uncles. Lord Taoist Xinyang chuckled. No need, no need. Today is the last time you'll call me Martial Uncle. From now on, you'll have to call me Senior Brother or Senior Sister. Qin Shi smiled and didn't stand on ceremony. Since he had formed his nascent soul, he was naturally the Grand Supreme Elder and Lord Taoist Shoujing from now on, so he naturally had to change the way he addressed him. After he finished saluting, the core formation cultivators also saluted him. Greetings, Martial Uncle Shoujing. Dozens of core formation cultivators saluted him at the same time. Emo Tiange was shocked by the scene in front of her. Not long ago, she had to call these people martial uncles, but in the blink of an eye, they had to call Qin Shi martial uncle. Although they didn't have to call her martial uncle, she and Qin Shi were husband and wife, so they still regarded her as an elder. Of course, the fact that she and Qin Shi had become dual cultivation partners wouldn't be made public until she reported it to Master. Qin Shi was calm. He still smiled and said to these people, no need to be so polite. Then he turned to Lord Taoist Xinyang. Martial Uncle Xinyang, I haven't heard from you for 10 years, so I've made you worry about me. I'm really ashamed. Lord Taoist Xinyang said with a smile. What shame. For the past 10 years, you were trapped in a dangerous place like Demonic Mountain. Not only did you manage to escape in the end, but you also formed your nascent soul and greatly raised the prestige of Xianqing School. Welcoming you today is what we ought to do. Qin, she was speechless. He'd always been low-key and wasn't good at interacting with people. Lord Taoist Jinyang being so cautious about this matter made him feel uneasy even though he thought highly of him. Lord Taoist Miaoing noticed his uneasiness, so she immediately said to Lord Taoist Jinyang with a smile, Senior Martial Brother Jinyang, Shoujing just came back, so I'm afraid he's tired. Why don't you let him rest first? We could talk about this later. All right. Lord Taoist Jinyang patted his head and said with a smile, Shoujing, you two can go back to Clear Spring Peak to rest and see your master. Junior Martial Brother Jinghe will definitely be very happy to see you two back. Lord Taoist Xinyang had always been steady, but today he was so happy that he almost fainted. Seeing this, Mo Tiange was secretly amused. In fact, the point wasn't that she formed his nascent soul, but that he formed his nascent soul at the right time. Although Xianqing School's nascent soul cultivators weren't as good as Tiandao sects, they were young and had great potential. However, they were always suppressed by Tiandao sect in terms of numbers and strength. Coincidentally, the last time Demonic Mountain opened, Tiandao sect lost a nascent soul cultivator and its reputation declined. Qin Shi forming his nascent soul at this time not only greatly raised the prestige of Xianqing School, but also made the number of nascent soul cultivators in Xianqing School finally catch up with Tiandao sect. In that case, everyone would calculate that in another 100 or 200 years Tiandao sect would lose 1 or 2 nascent soul cultivators, and Xianqing School would fully deserve to be the number 1 sect in the Celestial Pole. The number 1 sect in the Celestial Pole wasn't just a title. The benefits it brought were obvious. First of all, it was attractive to cultivators. Many cultivators would come because of the reputation of the number 1 sect in the Celestial Pole, and they could choose the best disciples. With the best disciples, their development potential would be greater than that of other cultivation groups, and the sect would continue to prosper. As the head Grand Supreme Elder of Xianqing School, Lord Taoist Xinyang had lived for more than 1,000 years and struggled for the sect's affairs for several hundred years. Now that he was in charge and Xianqing School had a chance to become the number 1 sect in the Celestial Pole, how could he not be happy? Then he gave them a few words of encouragement. Even Wu De and Liang, who followed them back, also benefited from the head Grand Supreme Elder's praise. They were so excited that they almost fainted. The two of them felt helpless. After a long time, they finally escaped and returned to Clear Spring Peak. As soon as they arrived at Clear Spring Peak, several senior martial brothers and sisters welcomed them with their disciples. They spent some time chatting about some things before they were finally allowed to go to Shanqing Palace. Greetings to Grandmaster Shoujing, Martial Uncle Qingwei. Once they entered Shanqing Palace, a maid immediately came to greet them. Mo Tiange swept her gaze around. Lord Taoist Jinghe was in the hall. Where's your Grandmaster? Qin Shi asked. Mame bowed and answered on behalf of the maids. Grandmaster's in the closed-door meditation room. Lord Taoist Jinghe's cultivation level was extremely high, so he wasn't afraid of being disturbed when he cultivated, so he always sat in the hall and cultivated. But now, he was in closed-door meditation room because he was seriously injured. Qin Shi nodded. I see. You can go now. Yes. The maids respectfully saluted him again, then went to do their own things. Qin Shi looked back at Mo Tiange. It seems Master's injuries are really serious. He's actually in the closed-door meditation room. Mo Tiange nodded silently. Ever since she entered the sect, she had never seen Lord Taoist Jinghe enter the closed-door meditation room. Even if he said he wanted to cultivate, he only laid a restriction in the hall. She had only heard of that closed-door meditation room, but she had never been there. Let's go take a look first. I hope Master's fine. Qin Shi sighed softly and led Mo Tiange out of the hall. After several turns, they finally stopped in front of an inconspicuous stone room. Upon seeing this stone room, Mo Tinga felt this was a real cultivation place for middle-stage nascent soul cultivators. There weren't any unnecessary decorations, and there were only many restrictions. Unfortunately, Lord Taoist Jinghe had very few opportunities to use it. Stopping in front of the stone room, Qin Shi sighed again and said, "The last time Master entered the closed-door meditation room was when I just entered the sect. At that time, Master hadn't reached the peak of the middle stage of the nascent soul realm, so he often entered closed-door meditation room. Later, when he reached the peak of the middle stage of the nascent soul realm, he didn't have any fated chances, so he cultivated less and tried to break through his mental state. I didn't expect this would happen the next time he used the closed-door meditation room." He put his palms together, quickly made a set of hand seals, and hit the door of the stone room. The stone room moved slightly. After a while, a voice came from inside. "Is it Xia?" The voice sounded a little old. Mo Tinga and Qin Shi looked at each other and saw shock in each other's eyes. Qin Shi answered, "Yes, Master. Tinga and I are back." After a while, the door to the stone room slowly opened with a loud bang. As the stone door moved, they saw Lord Taoist Jinghe sitting on the stone bed inside the stone room. He was still wearing a golden crown and luxurious clothes, and he still looked noble, but his black hair had turned white. "Master," the two of them called out in unison. They walked forward tremblingly, knelt in front of the stone bed, and looked up at Lord Taoist Jinghe. Not only had his hair turned white, but his eyebrows and beard had also lost their color. There were fine wrinkles at the corners of his eyes and forehead, and the muscles at the corners of his mouth had softened. Lord Taoist Jinghe originally looked like he was in his 30s or 40s, but now he looked like he was in his 50s. What kind of injury could have caused him to age so much in 10 years? "Master, why did you?" Mo Tinga couldn't finish her words. Although this master always annoyed her, she knew he was good to her. In this life, except for her dead mother and second uncle, no one else loved her as much as he did. Seeing her master like this, she felt as if someone was clutching her heart. Lord Taoist Jinghe looked up and swept his gaze over the two disciples kneeling in front of him. He smiled slightly. "Don't worry, I won't die." After saying that, his gaze fell on Qin Shi, and he showed a gratified smile. "Shi, you finally formed your nascent soul." Qin Shi looked up, grasped Lord Taoist Jinghe's hand tightly, and said hoarsely, "Master, how are your injuries? If you have any methods or medicinal pills you need, just tell us. We'll definitely do it for you." "Right?" Mo Tinga remembered if her master's injuries could be cured with medicinal pills, she didn't lack them at all. "Master, tell me. No matter what kind of medicinal pills I need, it's fine as long as there's hope." Alas, Lord Taoist Jinghe sighed softly and stroked her head as if she was still a child. "You don't have to be like this. If you need medicinal pills, are you afraid your martial uncle Jinyang won't get them for me? Although Master is seriously injured, he's fine for the time being. We'll talk about this later. By the way, what do you want to tell Master?" Upon hearing this, Qin Shi's eyes reddened. He took Mo Tinga's hand and said cautiously, "Master, Tinga and I were trapped on Demonic Mountain for the past 10 years. I formed my nascent soul and became husband and wife with Tinga, so I didn't report it to Master at that time. I hope Master can forgive me." Lord Taoist Jinghe smiled. It was a gentle and kind smile that had never been seen before. He looked at his two most beloved disciples and said softly, "I'm more than happy that you two became husband and wife. You don't have to apologize." He looked at Qin Shi and asked, "Shi, since you formed your nascent soul and performed dual cultivation with Tinga, the knot in your heart must have been resolved and the demon barrier must have disappeared, right?" Qin Shi said in a low voice, "Yes." Disciple didn't listen to Master's advice before and made Master worry. Lord Taoist Jinghe nodded with a smile. "It's good that you understand." He then turned to Mo Tinga. "Tinga, what about you? Do you have any worries or obsessions in your heart now?" "No," Mo Tinga answered softly. Mo Tinga answered softly, "Rest assured, Master. Senior Martial Brother and I have been honest with each other. Those misunderstandings and obsessions no longer exist." That's good. Lord Taoist Jinghe paused for a while and said, "You disappeared for 10 years, but Master always believed you'd come back. Today, you finally didn't let me down." Both Mo Tiange and Qin, she felt their hearts tremble. Lord Taoist Jinghe sighed again. "You too. Forget it. It's good that you're back. Since you've become husband and wife, you should cultivate well. Master will continue his closed-door meditation. If you have nothing to do, you don't have to disturb me. Master still wants to recover from his injuries and advance to the late stage of the nascent soul realm." Chapter 317. When they came out of Lord Taoist Jinghe's closed-door meditation room, both Mo Tiange and Qin, she were in a heavy mood. After walking a bit further, they stopped by the railing at the same time. "Tiange," Qin, she called out. He wanted to say something, but hesitated. Mo Tiange smiled and sighed. She hugged his waist and said softly, "I know what you want to say. Don't worry. If there's anything in the virtual sky world that Master can use, I won't be stingy." Qin, she was moved when he heard what she said. He said gratefully, "Thank you for saying that. What are you thanking me for?" Mo Tiange chuckled. "He's your master and also my master. In this world, no one treats me better than him except you." Qin, she didn't say anything and just hugged her tightly. He knew that although she had the indifference and decisiveness a cultivator should have, she was also a person who valued relationships. She would always remember who treated her well, and if there was a chance in the future, she would pay them back double. They both knew their master's injury was very serious, but it wasn't like there was no way. With the spiritual plants in the virtual sky world and Qin's knowledge of many pill recipes, Martial Uncle Xinjiang might not have seen all of those pills. "Later, let's study what medicinal pills can be used to heal Master," Mo Tiange said softly. Qin, she answered. This was the only thing they could do for their master right now. In their divine senses, a foundation-building cultivator was walking towards them, but they didn't move. There were only maids in Shanqing Palace, and these maids didn't dare to disturb them. However, when the man saw them, he called out, "Auntie, Master." The voice sounded very surprised. Hearing this voice, the two of them hurriedly separated. They saw Yi Zhenji standing not far away, looking at them with tears almost falling from his eyes. "Zhenji." Yi Zhenji wiped the tears from the corners of his eyes and murmured, "You're finally back. I knew you'd definitely come back." Mo Tiange recalled what Wuda and Liang said happened to him all these years. Seeing his haggard face, she felt sorry for him. Although Zhenji wasn't her disciple, she brought him up. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say he was her son. "Zhenji, why did you lose so much weight?" She grasped Yi Zhenji's pulse, then probed his body with her true aura. However, she discovered that he wasn't injured at all. Furthermore, the spiritual aura inside his body was stable. He was already in the middle stage of the foundation-building realm. Upon hearing her question, Yi Zhenji unexpectedly lowered his head and started to cry. Back then, when he lacked experience and his character was a bit weak, he never cried. Today, however, Mo Tiange and Qin, she were startled. The first thing Mo Tiange thought about was the imprisonment Wuda and Liang mentioned. During those 10-odd years, did he suffer inhumane torture? Seeing them all of a sudden was why he felt so wronged? Qin, she sighed and asked, "What made you so sad?" Yi Zhenji wiped away his tears, then looked up and said, "Master, Auntie, please save Linbo. Please help me save Linbo." Mo Tiange and Qin, she looked at each other. Both of them were confused. Linbo. Then the two of them remembered that Yi Zhenji was trapped by Master Taoist by you precisely because of a woman. Could it be this Linbo? Thinking up to this point, the two of them pondered inwardly. Could it be that Zhenji has some sort of relationship with this woman? Yi Zhenji said, "Linbo, come with me. I'll tell you slowly." As he led them, Yi Zhenji first asked them if they had been all right in the past 10 years. We learned that they had become husband and wife. He was quite happy. Presumably, he had figured it out in the past few years. Then he talked about his experiences in the past few years, which were not different from what Wu De and Liang said. He was indeed imprisoned by Wanderer Baiyu. Before he left, she was worried and gave him several magic talismans to protect himself. During those 10-odd years, Yi Jinji pretended to be incompetent and suffered a lot to numb Wanderer Baiyu. In the end, when Wanderer Baiyu was unprepared, he killed him with magic talismans. After listening to this, Mo Tinga and she were quite surprised. Although they both loved Yi Jinji, they always thought he was a little weak and couldn't be a great person. They didn't expect him to have such scheming and perseverance when he was in danger. It seemed it was the right decision to let him go out to gain experience. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been able to stimulate his potential. The Linbua he mentioned was called Shui Linbua. She was originally from the Eastern Sea. The Eastern Sea had been in chaos for several decades. She was lucky and accidentally found a way to cross Demonic Mountain and come to Kunwu. Her aptitude wasn't good, so she couldn't enter those cultivation sections. As a woman, she struggled to cultivate in Kunwu. Later, she unexpectedly had a fated chance and advanced to the foundation building realm. She was a foundation building female cultivator without a backer. Although her aptitude wasn't good, she was a human furnace desired by many cultivators. Wanderer Baiyu took a fancy to her, just like that, in Kuanzhong City. Coincidentally, on the day Wanderer Baiyu tried to capture her, Yi Jinji passed by and was mistakenly thought to be Shui Linbua's accomplice, so he was captured together with her. Later, Wanderer Baiyu discovered Yi Jinji's identity. Although he knew he had captured the wrong person, he didn't dare to let Yi Jinji go. He was worried that Yi Jinji would hold a grudge against him, but he also didn't dare to kill him. He was worried that Yi Jinji might have left something like a natal lamp behind. If Yi Jinji was tracked down, Wanderer Baiyu wouldn't have a good ending. Therefore, he imprisoned Yi Jinji in a place and trapped him with layers of restrictions to prevent others from tracking him. Shui Linbua used some kind of technique to make Wanderer Baiyu mistakenly think she had lost her primordial lien, so she was also imprisoned. She was a loyal person. Seeing that she had implicated Yi Jinji, she protected him all these years, saving him a lot of suffering. Because of this, she suffered more than Yi Jinji. When she escaped, her injuries were already too serious to heal. Unfortunately, after Yi Jinji brought her back, Mo Tinga and she weren't there. Lord Daoist Jinghe was seriously injured and in closed-door meditation, so he didn't have time to take care of himself. Although Shui Linbua's life was saved for the time being, no one could cure her injuries. After hearing this, Mo Tinga and she looked at each other. Both of them had a plan in their minds. Since the two of them went through trials and tribulations together, they must have developed feelings for each other, which was why Jinji was so excited. Mo Tinga sighed inwardly. It turned out Jinji had also grown up and had a sweetheart. Jinji, Mo Tinga asked, "Don't you have the healing medicinal pills Annie gave you?" She didn't get better after taking them. Yi Jinji shook his head dejectedly. After we were caught, my Chinquan bag was searched. Fortunately, I was careful and secretly hid some things. Later, I killed Wanderer Baiyu, but I didn't get them back. I didn't even get the magic tools Master and Annie gave me. It's fine. She comforted him. Master can refine more magic tools for you. Yi Jinji smiled and whispered, "Thank you, Master." After a pause, he continued, "Later, I finally got in touch with the senior martial brothers of the branch in Kuanzhong City, and they sent me and Linbua back. When Grandmaster heard about it, he specially summoned Martial Uncle Mingjin. Martial Uncle Mingjin went to Kuanzhong City and destroyed the Individual Cultivators Alliance. Mingjin was Lord Daoist Jinghe's third disciple and one of his first 3 disciples. He had been in the core formation realm for more than 200 years and was now in the late stage of the core formation realm. He was skilled and powerful. Although the Individual Cultivators Alliance also had several core formation cultivators, the strongest ones, Daoist Kumu and Tong Tianyun, died on Demonic Mountain, and Wanderer Baiyu was killed by Yi Jinji. The remaining ones were definitely not Mingjin's match. However, although Lord Daoist Jinghe liked to kill, he rarely implicated others. Presumably, Jinji was tortured too miserably
which made him so angry. Grandmaster also gave Linbua medicinal pills, but Linbua's injuries were too serious, so he could only save her life. I know Grandmaster is also seriously injured now, so I don't dare to disturb him again. But Marshal Uncle Mingjin and Grandmaster Xianin can't do anything about Linbua's injuries, so I don't know what to do. As they talked, they walked to the door of Mingxin residence. When Mo Tinga saw Zhenji opening the restriction, she asked, "Do you live here now?" Yi Zhenji answered, "Grandmaster took pity on Linbua and liked her unyielding character, so he let her stay. He said Mingxin residence has calm spiritual aura and is suitable for healing, so he let her live here. In order to take care of Linbua, I usually live here." His expression was sad but calm, and his smiling baby face also looked a bit more stable, which made Mo Tinga feel very gratified. "You've grown up, Zhenji." Yi Zhenji smiled. "Annie, I'm almost 80 years old. I should have grown up long ago." Mo Tinga also smiled. Zhenji was much taller than her, and now he looked more mature than her. He was indeed no longer the child who always relied on her. Nothing in Mingxin residence had changed. When Mo Tinga moved away, she only took daily necessities with her. Now, even the furnishings hadn't changed. Yi Zhenji led them all the way to the lounge, opened the restriction, and called softly, "Linbua." Mo Tinga and Qin, she followed him inside. In the small lounge, the originally cold jade bed was now covered with a layer of soft fur. A haggard young woman sat cross-legged on the bed with her eyes closed, seemingly healing her injuries. As soon as Mo Tinga saw her expression, she knew her dantian and meridians were injured. Then, she saw that the spiritual aura all over her body was faintly discernible and often scattered. She speculated that her meridians were riddled with holes and couldn't retain spiritual aura at all. She stepped forward, gently took the woman's hand, and carefully probed her spiritual aura. Sure enough, her speculation was confirmed. If she hadn't seen it with her own eyes, she wouldn't have believed that a cultivator's meridians were injured to this extent, and her dantian was also damaged. If it weren't for the medicinal power settling in her dantian, she would have died long ago. "Auntie, how is it?" Yi Zhenji was a little anxious, but he was afraid of disturbing Shui Linbua, so he asked softly. Mo Tinga sighed and looked at Qin Shi. "It's very serious. No wonder Senior Marshal Brother Mingjin and Marshal Uncle Xianin couldn't do anything about it." Upon hearing that, Qin Shi also stepped forward to probe the woman's meridians and also frowned. Looking at their expressions, Yi Zhenji couldn't care about anything else and begged, "Auntie, Master, please think of a way, think of a way." "Don't worry," Mo Tinga said. "As long as there's a way, I'll definitely help you. But you have to cheer up." Upon hearing her comfort, Yi Zhenji showed a determined expression. "Auntie, rest assured, no matter what happens in the end, I won't give up hope." Mo Tinga smiled and nodded. Since Zhenji was begging her, she would certainly try her best. Moreover, this woman came from the Eastern Sea, so she might be related to Bishuan court. This could also be considered a bit of a connection with her. Chapter 3:18. At this time, Shui Linbua finally opened her eyes. The first person she saw was Yi Zhenji, and she asked softly, "Why are you here again? Aren't you going to cultivate?" There was a hint of reproach in her tone, which reminded Mo Tinga that she used to urge Yi Zhenji to cultivate like this, and she couldn't help but smile. Yi Zhenji stepped forward, sat down beside her, and said softly, "Linbua, my aunt and master finally came back safely. Come and see them." Shui Linbua seemed to notice that there was someone else in the room. Even though Mo Tinga and Qin Shi had restrained their auras, they were, after all, a core formation cultivator and a nascent soul cultivator. She didn't feel anything at all, so her divine sense must have been seriously injured to be so slow. She raised her head curiously, glanced at Qin Shi, and then fixed her eyes on Mo Tinga's face. This made Mo Tinga feel interested. Any woman, whether mortal or cultivator,
would look at Qin Shi's face when they saw the two of them. She didn't expect this woman to just glance at him and then stare at her face. Mo Tinga guessed that if this woman didn't have an extremely good state of mind and didn't care about beauty or ugliness, then she must be very scheming. But the next moment, Shui Linbua's reaction overturned her guess. Shui Linbua's skinny, bloodless face was slightly flushed, and her expression gradually became excited. She didn't even care about etiquette and shouted at Mo Tinga, "Fairy, are you a fairy?" Not only were Mo Tinga and Qin Shi stunned, but even Yi Zhenji was stunned. He asked her strangely, "What fairy?" "Linbua, what did you say?" Shui Linbua stared at Mo Tinga expectantly and said, 58 years ago, on the coast of the East Sea, in and of the Shui family. "Fairy, do you still remember?" Mo Tinga was stunned, and the image of a little girl with a sallow face and hopeful eyes gradually emerged in her mind. 58 years ago, on the coast of the East Sea, she gave a little girl an ordinary cultivation technique and let her embark on the path to immortality. "It's you? You're really a fairy?" Shui Linbua cried tears of joy and then struggled to get up and kneel. "Fairy, thank you for giving me the book. If it weren't for you, there would be no Shui Linbua today. Get up first." Mo Tinga gently raised her hand, and an invisible spiritual aura pushed Shui Linbua back to the bed. He looked at Shui Linbua in disbelief, and then at Mo Tinga. "Linbua, is my aunt the fairy who gave you the cultivation technique?" Shui Linbua nodded and said happily, "So this fairy is your aunt? No wonder I always felt that Xianxing School's clothes were very similar to fairies." At that time, she was only 8 years old, so she could only vaguely remember many things. She could only roughly remember Mo Tinga's appearance. If it wasn't for the fact that Mo Tinga's appearance hadn't changed all these years and her clothes were still the same as before, she probably wouldn't have recognized her. Mo Tinga originally thought that since this female cultivator came from the Eastern Sea, they might have some kind of relationship, but she never expected that their relationship would be so deep. Back then, it was just something he did casually, but who would have thought that it would create a foundation-building female cultivator today? Moreover, she even had a close relationship with Shinji. It could be seen that there were indeed coincidences in this world. Shui Linbua didn't mention such a trivial matter back then. So Qin, she also didn't know. Seeing their expressions, he asked Mo Tinga, "What's wrong? Is she your old friend?" Mo Tinga nodded and smiled. "I also didn't expect it to be so coincidental. Back then, I was ordered by my master to travel and arrived at the coast of Donglin. This child has spiritual roots. Back then, her parents begged me, so I gave her a cultivation technique. I really didn't expect her to cultivate to this level." "I see." Qin Shi nodded. Seeing that Shui Linbua didn't know how to address Qin Shi, Yi Zhenji introduced, "Linbua, this is my master, Master Taoist Shojing." "Oh no, my master has advanced to the nascent soul realm. He's now Lord Taoist Shojing." Shui Linbua was startled and immediately became nervous. She had long known that Yi Zhenji's identity was extraordinary. Her aunt and master were both core formation cultivators, and they were elders of a big cultivation group like Xianxing School. But she didn't expect Qin Shi to advance to the nascent soul realm so soon. She was originally just an ordinary individual cultivator and rarely saw core formation cultivators. It was only after she came back with Yi Zhenji that she saw nascent soul cultivators. Now that she heard the person standing in front of her with a nascent soul cultivator, she was so nervous that she didn't know how to salute. In the end, Qin Shi smiled and said, "You don't have to be nervous. Since you're Zhenji's." He paused. There were some things Zhenji didn't say, and it wasn't good for him to say them clearly. So he said vaguely, "Grandmaster has allowed you to stay, so you're a disciple of our Clear Spring Peak. Just call me as you should." "Yes." Shui Linbua calmed down, saluted, and said respectfully, "Greetings to Grandmaster Shojing." After the salute, Mo Tinga looked at Qin Shi. The two of them had been companions in the virtual sky world for 10 years, and they had long understood many things. Qin Shi understood what she meant, So he said with a smile, "You decide." Mo Tinga also smiled, took out a jade bottle from her robe, and gave it to Yijinji. "Jinji, we'll find a way to treat Linbua's injury. Before that, give her one pill every 3 days. After taking it, use your spiritual aura to help her heal for 4 hours." "Yes, Auntie." Mo Tinga smiled and said to them, "Your master and I just came back, and we still have other things to arrange, so we'll go back first. You can heal and cultivate as usual." "Yes," Yijinji said hurriedly. "Auntie, I'll see you out." Mo Tinga raised her hand to stop him. "No need. Just watch over Linbua." She nodded at Shui Linbua with a smile, then left with Qin Shi. After leaving Shanqing Palace, the two of them had their own thoughts. They walked at the same time, one going east and the other going south. After walking about 10 steps, they realized that the other party didn't go with them, so they stopped and turned around, stunned. "Why are you going that way?" After asking at the same time, they were stunned again, remembering that their caves weren't in the same place. The two of them laughed at each other, sighed, and walked together. "What should we do?" Qin Shi asked. "Should we go to your cave or mine first?" Mo Tinga said, "Let's go back to our respective caves. We haven't been back for a long time, so we have to deal with things first. We'll contact each other when we're done." Qin Shi thought about it and nodded. "Okay, remember to send me a summoning talisman." Mo Tinga nodded, and the two of them separated and went back to their caves. Since they were married, they naturally had to live together in the future. The two of them had also discussed this matter. Qin Shi said that his cave looked inconspicuous, but was actually located on a relatively large spiritual eye in the spirit vein of Clear Spring Peak. He also thought of many ways to enhance the spiritual aura there, and now it was not inferior to Shanqing Palaces. And the most important thing was that it was very secluded and there were few idle people around, which suited their quiet personality. And Mo Tinga's current cave was big enough, and the spiritual aura was also good, but because it was too big, there would be a lot of people to take care of it. Moreover, the two of them probably wouldn't accept many disciples, so it was better to give it to others and make the best use of it. Mo Tinga thought for a long time and agreed. Her current cave was used by Lord Daoist Xianin before he formed his nascent soul. She only lived there for 2 years, so there weren't many things, so it was convenient to move. But no matter how convenient it was, she couldn't move immediately. She still had to go back and deal with some chores. Fortunately, Xianqing School Steward's Hall was very capable. She had been gone for 10 years, but the cave was still in good condition. The things that needed to be done weren't left behind at all, and the spirit stones used were all deducted from her offerings. She hadn't received offerings for 10 years, but now she received a huge sum of money all of a sudden. When she finished her business and told the steward's hall that she wanted to move to another cave, Qin Shi's summoning talisman arrived. Upon hearing that she wanted to move to Qin Shi's cave, the steward of the steward's hall was so surprised that his jaw almost dropped. Now that he saw Mo Tinga smiling after receiving the summoning talisman, his imagination began to run wild. Mo Tinga was about to reply when she sensed a nascent soul cultivator approaching. Then, Qin Shi landed on a flying cloud and walked in. She was surprised. Why did he come? She just received the summoning talisman. Qin Shi smiled. I just remembered that I was going to the spiritual beast pavilion to pick up the spiritual beast I was fostering, so I came out. Oh. After answering, Mo Tinga remembered that the steward of the steward's hall was still there, so she said to that person, "All right, I'll leave everything to you. Go do it." Yes. That person's gaze shifted back and forth between her and Qin Shi. He bowed to Qin Shi and was about to leave, but he suddenly remembered that he was no longer a core formation cultivator, so he hurriedly bowed to him and left to handle matter. Mo Tinga stared at the steward's back and sighed. I guess he must be thinking, this martial uncle Qingwei seems to be well-behaved, but I didn't expect her to hook up with Grandmaster Shoujing. She really doesn't show her true colors. Qin Shi couldn't help but laugh when he said the last sentence in a very funny tone. Seeing him laughing, Mo Tinga couldn't help but laugh as well. She asked, "Are you done with your business?" She sat down next to her and put his arm around her waist out of habit. He answered, "What can happen to my small cave? I just need to ask him a few questions." Tinga nodded. "That's true. A small cave has its own benefits." She paused for a moment, then asked, "What do you think about Master's matter?" This question made she smile disappear. He said, "This matter can't be rushed. We still have to go see Master in 2 days. How about this? It's not convenient to tell him about the virtual sky world, but we can show Master a few kinds of medicinal pills first and tell him we found a lot of spiritual plants on Demonic Mountain. In this way, Master will believe we have the ability to help him, and then he'll tell us if there are medicinal pills that can treat his injury." Tinga agreed. "What about Shui Linbua?" This question stumped Shi. "To be honest, I've never seen anyone with such a serious injury, and I don't know what to do. There are several medical cultivators in our sect who may know more about injuries. Why don't we ask them?" "Oh, right." His reminder reminded Tinga of senior martial brother Kwang Zhu and his family in Seoul's Retreat Peak. She'd better find time to ask them. These 2 things can't be rushed. Right now, there's one thing I have to discuss with you. She looked at her and said helplessly, "My soul formation is of special significance to the sect, so Martial Uncle Jinyang sent a message saying that we'll hold a soul formation ceremony. In addition, although we've made a blood oath and become husband and wife, we should also hold a dual cultivation ceremony." "Don't." Tinga immediately refused. Then, seeing his puzzled look, she lowered her head and explained, "You can decide the soul formation ceremony, but can we forget about the dual cultivation ceremony? I really don't like that." She thought for a moment, then nodded. "I know what you mean. I also don't like that kind of atmosphere. How about this? I'll just tell Martial Uncle Jinyang and make an announcement at the soul formation ceremony." Tinga accepted this idea, so she didn't say anything. You're tuning into the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.